Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newly revamped weekend recap here over on the reserve team. You'll notice with me today is our producer extraordinaire, Shaun. The previous host of the weekend recap, I managed to usurp him in a late contract negotiations. So I'm absolutely loving that I've taken his job and he's been relegated to the bench. Welcome, Shaun. The wheels always come off the wagon. I'm pretty sure there was a podcast a couple of weeks ago where Meatloaf References was the fifth wheel off the eight-wheeler by that point. So let's get right into it. We are going to jump straight into the W League. We're going to talk about the first of two games from Thursday night's doubleheader, the Western Sydney Wanderers and Melbourne City. A Lena Karmas goal was the split for the two sides as the Wanderers ground out a 1-0 victory over Melbourne City. This game will see Melbourne City. This game resulted in Melbourne City, who will now end up with their lowest points total ever to end a W League season. Where has it all gone wrong for City this season, Shaun? I thought this contest was a very grind out result for the Wanderers. Very similar to what they had last week against Perth Glory. A lot of shots that were just running off the crossbar. This game also could have very easily been a 3-0, 4-0 victory. Instead, it's back-to-back 1-0 victory for the 1-0 victories for the Wanderers, which is not a bad thing. You take goals however you can get them. I don't think goal differential is going to play too much into who makes the finals and who doesn't, and we'll touch on this again later as well with the Melbourne Victory Canberra United game. I think Wanderers just need to grind out ugly games, get in front, and then just defend like hell for the remainder. If we look at the Wanderers' next remaining three fixtures, it is Melbourne Victory away, Melbourne City away, and Adelaide United away. So they're not going to play at home again. They'll need to run the board to be even that outside chance of making the finals. Do you think they can run the board, or could we potentially see next week be the diminish their finals hopes? Fair enough. We might move on to the next game then, and we've got a lot to talk about with this one from not only a massive run of goals, but a continual number of problems with Fox as we move on to the second half of the doubleheader, Perth Glory versus Sydney FC. An absolute masterclass on the pitch here from Sydney FC, 6 goals to the good. And an excellent performance from Hannah Lowry, scoring 2 for the Perth Glory, who managed to almost get them back in it for a while until the class of Sydney FC ran out. 2 goals apiece to Remy Seamson, Princess Abini, and Claire Wheeler for a 6-2 victory. So the first talking point I want to make from this match is the absence of Teresa Polias due to work commitments. We're hosting the World Cup in 2.5 short years. Actually, no. It's 2.5 short years. How do we still have a league that's 1, semi-professional, 2, does not have a full home and away season, and 3, is resulting in the captain of a squad not being able to show up for a game because of work commitments, because she still has to hold down a full-time job? Why is this still a thing? Shaun? I do not know. I can look it up now. And if you know it in the chat, by all means, please tell us. Because I don't believe it's ever been... Oh, there we go. So, an elementary school teacher at public school. So...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. So, We just got a message on Twitter. We have to give a shout out to our overlord Rose to let us know that my audio hadn't been coming through correctly, which is fine. That's no drama. We only made it through 8 minutes or so. But so far, Stephen, only you've been able to hear my beautiful voice. Now everybody should be able to hear both of us, which will hopefully make it a fair bit easier. These are the teething problems that happen with live viewership and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, wonderful. So they've been treated to 10 minutes of me.
Yeah, but what a 10 minutes. Hey, look, if I've enjoyed it, there's someone out there that's enjoyed it as well.
Fair enough. So we know that so Teresa Polias is an public school teacher in primary school. So I can understand not being able to travel cross country to to Perth and then making it back for her job the next day. But the fact of the matter is that she shouldn't have to be a school teacher. I'm sure she wants to, and I'm sure she's great at it. But the fact of the matter is that she should be able to make professional football her full-time job, and then go back into teaching afterwards. We're 2.5 years out from the World Cup. Why is this still a thing?
Well, I think there's another element as well, which becomes from like how lucrative that would actually be. So the reality is, for kind of like the 3 to 4 month season that you get paid for in the W League, if that was a 12-month wage offering the same amount, you'd actually still be getting paid less than you would in Europe and in North America. I think one of the reasons the W League has continued to run one in with the summer competition, but then also kind of build out and change these contract terms and these contracted dates, so the players are basically not there for a pre-season or really a post-season. They're just there for the matches during the course of the year, is one, to allow them to continue to go and get more lucrative contracts in Europe and North America without necessarily having to miss out on the W League season. So kind of maintaining that off-season switch between North American football and the W League. Obviously that's changed this year with COVID and with a lot of delayed restarts. It's obviously changed as well with the very late start to the W League season. Usually they're finished kind of by around the Christmas period, not just kicking off. So there's been a couple of adjustments there relating to that and players having to pick and choose. But then also the cannibalisation of the WMPL as well. There are certain players, not all of them, but WMPL players that do earn a second income from playing in that competition. And I think there is also an overriding concern. And again, I'm not quoting anybody in particular here, so don't worry too much if you're in a particular state and worry if I'm talking about you. But I think there is a massive concern that if they do turn it to a full 12-month competition, or alternatively have it playing during the same time as the WMPL season, that they're going to cannibalise that competition, and the next generation of players and teams aren't going to get that exposure to playing against W League quality opposition early on in their development period. So I think it's a different conversation almost between the W League and the A League, because the W League has such like a deep roster of players that are also playing in the WMPL programs. And if you're a good young player, a talented young player, you get more minutes in a WMPL season. If you impress, then you're more likely to jump to that W League level, which I don't think necessarily happens at an A League. At an A League, it's all about how do we get young players more minutes at a like elite A League standard. Whereas for the WMPL, for some of those players, it's more about how do we get them year-round football. And then once they hit a certain point, once they hit a certain talent level, how do they then get both North American football or European football in the last 12 months and a W League supplementary income to there. So it's a fascinating period. I don't necessarily hate the fact that the W League isn't fully professional. I wish it had more games, 100%. Like we should be hitting 20 games as a minimum for a season. Home and away, 10 teams, that would be the dream by 2023. But at the same time, I don't really hate the fact that we've got players going and playing in Europe and North America, getting exposed to different styles, high quality opposition, a greater paycheck, so it actually can be a professional job. And I don't know Polias' scenario. Maybe she views herself as a teacher first and a footballer second. We don't really know with these individual circumstances, but I 100% agree with the sentiment behind that, where we need more from football. I just think there are other things that need to be done first, and expanding the season beyond its current format is absolutely 100% top of the list. But as far as on a more positive note, like what did you make of Sydney FC's performance? Like they absolutely belted Perth here, and Perth have had a tough run of it.
They did, and I loved it. It showed that the game against the Brisbane Roar, the 4-1 loss, was just a blip on the radar. That it was an off day. It's going to happen in a season. Every team has an off day. They're just not going to turn up for whatever reason. And the hallmark of the good sides is that they can come back and turn around and dominate the next week and the week after that. And we've seen that the last 2 weeks with victories against Adelaide and now Perth. That was also the manner in which the goals were scored. They were just fantastic, beautifully worked goals, moved through the middle of the park. Like if we didn't know Teresa Polias wasn't there, you wouldn't have known that she was missing, because just the way Sydney were able to work, it was like Teresa Polias was still there running the midfield. I think Perth have a lot of questions they need to ask. Like we talked about this on the podcast on Wednesday, that they just don't. I know they've been in quarantine, but they just don't seem to know what they are. Like I know, like it's almost like they're just waiting for the season to end so they can just get back to it and almost forget this season ever happened. Is that the thought that you have about it?
I'm trying to focus on the positive, right? There is a negative portion of me that wants to think they couldn't get Sam Kerr, so they can't be bothered with women's football anymore. So that kind of comes into it in the back of my head. But at the same time, they have had a very difficult season with the quarantines because Western Australia has taken such a hardline stance against playing other teams and quarantines and all that sort of stuff. It's affected the men's team as much as it has the women's team. The challenge that I think Perth have is that they don't have the depth of a lot of the other squads, and I don't think they have the talent in their starting 11 that a lot of the other squads do. For Newcastle, and I compare kind of the two squads at similar points to where we were in pre-season, and we both kind of thought these are going to struggle a little bit. But the difference is that the Newcastle players really came in off the back of a full WNPL season in New South Wales, went into a camp, and then came out the other side ready to go and play football again. So I think they had a little bit of an advantage, whereas for Perth, their pre-season was stop-start. I don't believe they actually announced a whole lot of player signings until very late in the pre-season. I don't think they played that many pre-season friendlies before their first match of the season. The challenge they've now got is that they are 6, 7, 8 games, kind of behind some of the other teams in the competition. They're going to have a whole run of tough fixtures coming up on weekends and midweek to try and catch up those games. And I don't think they've got the squad depth to really get them to that level and get them to that base. So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't want to be super critical of Perth Glory because I think some of it is out of their control, but at the same time, do I think they've put together a fantastic women's football program this season? No, not particularly. They do have a good coach who's got a long WNPL history, and apologies because his name's just escaped me and I will bring it up in a moment while you're kind of recapping. But this was the difference between a very, very good professionally run outfit and Ante-Eurocha's side does play a good brand of football, a good progressive brand. Like when we were talking about Melbourne City earlier, Sydney FC's the polar opposite. They've got a specific way they're trying to play, and when it works, it's very, very effective. And Perth Glory, who are effectively a semi-professional outfit or even an amateur outfit trying to play in a semi-professional division. And that chasm was huge. We haven't really mentioned individual performances yet, like Remy Simpson, when it took her a couple of weeks to score, but she now looks like a player that's going to score 5 every game. Lily Allfield, the keeper for Perth Glory, has been excellent this season. The way that we talk about a few different people having standout seasons like Tegan Micah, Lily Allfield has definitely been the best player from Perth as far as what I've seen anyway. We do have to shout out as well, I have to find her name, bear with me a moment, 17-year-old striker that got the double for Perth.
It was Hannah Lowry.
Hannah Lowry, thank you very much. Actually not her first goal, I thought it was going into that game because she's only 17. She scored last year, so she's turning out to be a bit of a sensation local to the Perth area, so fantastic to see her getting out there and competing at a very high level. I dare say she'll be one of the people that I would think will start getting taps on the shoulder from different colleges or teams in North America or in Europe or whatever else as we get more eyes on our product and on our best players. So there are silver linings for Perth, absolutely. Now it's about for the remaining 3-4 weeks of the season focusing on those silver linings and giving themselves the best platform to go on next season because they don't really have a whole lot to play for the remainder of this year.
Yeah, well, after playing on Thursday at 6 games left, every other team's played either 9 or 8. So as you mentioned, there are a couple of games behind. 6 games in 20 days for Perth as they play on the 8th of March, the 11th of March, the 14th, the 19th, the 25th, and the 28th. So a very condensed run out to the season. If you look at their opposition, it's going to be Newcastle, Canberra, the 2 Melbourne teams. Actually, they play their last 4 games are either against Melbourne Victory or Melbourne City, so a very tough run out to the end of the season. Moving on.
Well, before we do move on, the fascinating part about that, Perth having to play all those games in that period, who knows if they're going to have a full squad to pick from. I'm sure there'll be people that certain games in that run, they probably have work commitments as well. And that can be the difference, I think, at a semi-professional part-time level between making your rent that week. Like if you've got to go and work a shift somewhere because you can't get the time off or you don't have the leave or whatever else, it's going to be a big challenge for them. And really, I don't want to throw too much of the feet of the competition, but if the league had been split away earlier and independently operated earlier in the season, maybe more contingencies would be in place to say that Perth goes into a hub for 2 weekends in a row in New South Wales and Victoria to go and get through and catch up on their games. And maybe they do play 6 games in 20 days still, but at least it's better planned where they're not so many games behind so many of the other teams in the competition. I don't want to see this happen, but like if any delay happens that stops anybody getting into or out of Western Australia, there's going to be no solution other than for Perth to forfeit games, which is absolutely ridiculous at a top tier competition level. So like again, it's just kind of, there's a variety of dominoes the course of this season that have really punished Perth, and this just seems to be another one, the next one in the list, which is unfortunate because there are some good memories of Perth performances throughout the course of the season. I hope for the very strong women's footballing community in Western Australia that they do get better representation next year. And I've got a shout out as well, Will over in the chat, Constant _ on Twitter and Twitch, go and check out his stuff as well. Alex Aparkis, who previously coached in NPL New South Wales at Sydney University before making the trip over to Perth. So obviously a talented coach, has worked at a very high level at an NPL structure. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to show what he can do over the next few weeks with this Perth Glory side.
Yep. So we have to move on to the negatives of this game as well. We've delayed talking about it for long enough. And once again, Fox has screwed football. Not the vernacular I have written in our run sheet to describe this. We get a single camera setup to start with. There's no replays available. Numerous audio issues where we had commentary for maybe 2.5 minutes of the first half at the end, tops. The game was not even broadcast on Foxtel. It was a KO exclusive. So as someone who up until Friday was a Foxtel subscriber, I had to borrow someone's login to be able to watch this game, which is absolutely ridiculous. And we're going to talk about another game next, Newcastle Adelaide, that was also a KO exclusive game. Foxtel owns the product. I know they're outsourcing their coverage for the W League because they don't give a shit. I know the W League's there because it has to be there in the eyes of Foxtel, and they barely want to put any effort into the A League, let alone the W League. But the fact of the matter is, as I've said earlier, we're 2.5 years out from hosting the World Cup. We can't even get the broadcaster to give a shit about this game. How is this acceptable? Why are the APL not demanding any sort of compensation for what is either the 5th or 6th screw up of this season, when last year Foxtel basically held the game at a knife edge to, you renegotiate this contract because of COVID, or you can say goodbye to your coverage? How can the broadcaster do that, but the league then can't turn around and go, you're not providing a quality product, fix it up, or else we want more money from you to compensate for the fact that half these games have been unwatchable?
Yeah, I think, look, everything you've said 100% correct, but I think there's more. I think Fox Sports, Murdoch Media, and fuck Rupert Murdoch if he's listening. I don't really care if he hears about that. What's he going to do? Take any of my debt away from me? But they clearly don't care about football as a product. And one of the things that we've kind of gotten a bit of a benefit of is that we're getting more transparency against the back-end processes that work at Fox Sports and how things are prioritised and whatever else. So we know that they don't hold football in that high an esteem, and we know that, we think we know, we can speculate with confidence based on the myriad of issues that they've had this season in terms of their broadcast provided, is that they don't hold football in a high esteem, and they particularly don't hold women's football in a high esteem, despite the fact that they're getting $10 million a year from the federal government to promote women's sport in a grander light. It's not their priority. And I think what they're trying to do as well is present a subpar product and make it look like the A-League and W League isn't an elite, global level sport, so that they can drive down that price. And potentially when they go back into the next contract negotiations, assuming that they do go in at all, they will be able to provide and say, we've got no viewers for this content. Everybody's watching via streams, which they don't really count towards their Nielsen rating type things, like their Fox Sports subscription. It was actually only just as we were talking before we kicked off here that I actually knew you had a Fox Sports subscription. I've watched on KO. I now watch on the MyFootball Live app because I don't want to give them any more of my money or support. And my sincere hope is that cooler heads will prevail and people will remember all the issues that we've had this season with the quality and the detail that it provided to football when the next TV rights deal is negotiated. This is a whole other podcast topic that you and I could go on about for about 3.5 hours, about the viewing platform and the viewing experience. And probably will at future points. But yeah, it was unacceptable 6 weeks ago when the Hexagon of Doom appeared. It was unacceptable weeks ago, just in terms of the quality of the commentary that we were getting, like people getting together with no female representation on broadcast staff to talk about the game. And we know those people are there and accessible. We've seen Angie Beard. I'm being Melbourne biased here, so you can by all means jump in with any from New South Wales that you're aware of. But Angie Beard's done like sideline and co-commentary over the last few weeks for Melbourne games that Victory isn't playing in. Emma Checker did a fantastic job today for the Melbourne Victory Canberra United game. Like, we know that there are people out there that have an interest in this, and it's not difficult to get that. I think some of it has resonated, like the tuber guy thing. I've not seen anything from Fox Sports about it and how it happened, even though it got picked up by, you know, some large news scale outlets. The match going down, and even if you go on the the W League website now and try and go and watch some of the highlights of the goals and everything, you can tell they've touched it up as best they can to try and make it brighter and lighter, but it literally looks like it's filmed on a potato, because it's all just black, like kind of shadowy figures running around behind goals. You can't pick out like players' names or numbers on the back of their kits. It's just an incredibly poor quality product, and you know, football in general deserves better. Forget the male-female aspect of representation. Like, football and the fan support that it has at all levels throughout this country deserves better from their broadcast sponsor. So yeah, I think I and a lot of people are counting down the days until Fox Sports isn't involved again. But again, we don't know what's going to happen going into next season. There's no way they could go back into negotiations and expect to deliver this quality of product into the next season. So it's crazy.
I mean, maybe and I know that the FFA has the final say in a broadcast contract, because the Matildas and the Socceroos are part of that broadcast package, that minimum standards have to be met, otherwise the contract can be terminated at any time. That might be one way to safeguard it. You know, Stan Sport have reportedly indicated an interest. You know, so we know that there's at least one more person in the market that might, if Fox need content, which there's every chance they may, with sports dropping left, right, and center from their product, it might give an edge. But honestly, as you echoed, and I think a lot of people around Australian football echo, the sooner that Fox no longer has a place in this game, the better it is, because they don't care. I'll move on now to the Newcastle and Adelaide game, another KO exclusive game. So ridiculous that 2 of the 4 games this weekend were KO exclusive. You know, I was only able to watch the highlights of this. 3 cracking goals though. 2-1 scoreline. Goals to Gemma Simon for Newcastle, and Chelsea Dorber and Emily Conton hitting the scoreboard for Adelaide United. What did you think of this game?
Yeah, again, I loved it, and I didn't see this one live, full disclosure. I watched the mini match afterwards, but like the quality of the goals and the performances they put together. I've been a big rap for Adelaide for a good few weeks. I think on form, they've got the best front 2 in the competition. Cote Rojas is one of the stars of the comp entirely, but like Chelsea Dorber, Emily Condon, these team players and people that I didn't really know that much about at the start of the season, they blow me away with every single performance that they've got. Chelsea Dorber's goal was absolutely phenomenal. On her wrong foot, smashes it top corner after going on a good little run. Like, wonderful, wonderful stuff from Adelaide. They're playing some very good football. I don't think even the most like ardent Adelaide supporter would have had high hopes that they were going to be a potentially top 3 side going into this season and potentially make the final series at a canter as things are currently looking. But like, they're just grinding out results against everyone they play. I don't think they've had the games that like a Melbourne Victory has had, where they've absolutely belted a team. I think they get involved in like a scrap with everyone that they come up against, and that's why they're always competitive. But I think what they really need to like go into the final series with some swagger is to beat a team like 3-4, 5-0. I think that's like the cherry on top, the icing on the cake for them. So it'd be interesting to see if that comes in the next few weeks. Fantastic stuff for them. And again, the same praise that we've given Newcastle all throughout the course of this season. They went out and they had a crack. Like, Newcastle, even though they're underfunded, even though like they've had all the trials and tribulations that the whole Newcastle United Jets football club's gone through this off-season in terms of change of ownership and not unawareness, uncertainty surrounding like their coaching staff and setup. They have absolutely blown away everybody with their application, with their effort, and they don't take a backward step out there on the field. So huge credit to them for putting the fight in for the whole of the match, and huge credit, I think, to Adelaide United for really having that quality to get beyond what would have been a tough test. If they had played this game 12 months ago, or even at the start of the season, it would have ended a 1-1 draw. But Adelaide are just a class above at the moment. I thought they were excellent. What were your thoughts? I
thought that the better side won. It was really indicative from what I saw of Newcastle's season. Not that they didn't put in any effort, but they're getting outclassed. And we talked about that with the Perth game. It's a lot of NPL players who are just not struggling at this level, but just not adapting as well as one would hope. Like, they're putting in the best performances they can, and that's all you can ask of anyone. Adelaide's run to clear out the season, their remaining 3 games. They come back, they play Sydney again at home, then it's away to Brisbane and Western Sydney at home to finish out the season. So that could be that 4-goal game that you were talking about, the Western Sydney one to finish off the season. But apologies to Chrissy if she's listening. Sorry to potentially fill your thoughts with doom and gloom about that game, but it's out of those 3 games, it seems like that's the one where they could go on a tear and absolutely dominate a side.
Yeah, and keep it, like, let's just put, you and I, Steven, let's just put a little note next to those 3 fixtures, because I do want to come back and talk about the run home for 3 of the sides that we're going to cover. 2 we'll get to in a moment, but that last 3 for Adelaide, that's really going to make or break their season, depending on how they go against Sydney and Brisbane. That's going to be absolutely huge, and I cannot wait to see those games either.
Yep. Well, there we go. This win season holds steady in 3rd place. Will they stay there? Will they remain in the top 4 to finish the season? Because we may as well talk about it now, because the next 2 sides we're going to talk about are the Melbourne Victory and Canberra United, who are in 4th and 5th. So they're 3, 4, 5. Which one of them misses out?
I mean, that's the challenge, right? Like, so we learnt the reason that this game against Melbourne Victory and Canberra was huge is because if Melbourne Victory had won, they would have gone 4 points clear of Canberra, having both played the same amount of games in that 4th spot. That would have been massive. If Canberra had won, they would have leapfrogged Victory, albeit with a trickier run home. The biggest winner out of this result is actually Adelaide United, who we just spoke about, because it effectively, I think, guarantees them a top 4 finish based on the run home. Now, there is still a chance. We know the quality. We know how good they are. There is still a chance, I think, that Adelaide United could go out and lose to both Sydney and Brisbane and make this incredibly interesting and really bring it down to being like a final week of the season potential leapfrog in a couple of different scenarios to see how they go. They are, as things stand, 2 points clear of Melbourne Victory women and 4 points clear of the Canberra United side. So there's a little bit of stuff that could move around there, but if they can even get like a single point out of one of those games against Sydney and Brisbane and then the 3 points against Western Sydney, they are effectively going to guarantee themselves a top 3 finish, which is an absolutely, I think, fantastic return. Melbourne Victory, in this fixture in particular, it was really kind of like a really good bite-sized replica of their rest of season, where they did some brilliant things. They dictated tempo for quite a bit. They were on top for stretches in this game, and then other times they just let Canberra come back into it. I don't know how much of this game you actually saw, Stephen, because you were, of course, at the A-League fixture, which we'll get to in a little bit, but Melbourne Victory scored by way of Angie Beard. You can see her celebrating on the screen now, a miss-hit cross that kind of just fooled the keeper. I'm not 100% sure what happened with the keeper. We'll check this one out in a replay. If you're not watching, wait until Australian finishes and then go and find this one over on the W League website. I have no idea if the keeper thought it was going over, if they thought it was going to hit the crossbar, what the scenario was, but they snuck that cross in. Angie Bibb may take credit and say that she was deliberately shooting, but she definitely wasn't. And then they were pretty much on top of it for most of the half, and they just lost a little bit of concentration in first half injury time. They allowed for Canberra to get their equaliser, which was a well-worked goal, good ball in behind, an excellent finish, but that was just a really good microcosm, I think, for Victory, where they do wonderful things for like big stretches of matches, and just these tiny little individual like lapses in judgment or individual quality that really kind of tend to hurt them down the track. So 1-1 I thought was a fair result. It was a tense contest. I think Canberra's probably the big loser today, or this round, with Adelaide winning and Canberra not able to get the 3 points, which is a strange thing to say. Usually if a team travels away to Melbourne and comes away with a point, you'd praise them for it, but I think Canberra really needed to try and get 2 points and put themselves ahead of Melbourne Victory going into the last few games of the season. But what have you made on Melbourne Victory so far this season, and Canberra United, and how their years have gone?
Melbourne Victory have been very Jekyll and Hyde. They've been very up and down. They go out, put out dominating performances, and then come back and struggle the next week. They have the edge to finish up in that top 4 spot just because of the fact they're 2 points in front of Canberra. They both have the same amount of games played. Canberra, a very strong start of the season, have faltered in the last couple of weeks. Only the 1 win in their last 5. A very tough loss to Sydney in there, which kind of looked like it's sent Canberra off the rails a little bit. full credit that like they're doing what they can. It's just not working. I did only get to watch the highlights of this game as soon as I got home. I pulled them up. It looks like 1-1's a fair result. I think the top four will stay as it is, and we'll discuss the ladder in a moment. I just don't see how Canberra get back into it without, because they've got that run home of Brisbane, Perth, Newcastle, and Sydney. You'd say they got a chance to get, if they can get 7 points out of 12, that's a good run there. And I don't know if you can guarantee 7 there, especially with the amount of road trips they have in that. It's
tough.
It's going to be tough for Canberra to finish it out.
Yeah, so we've got first shout out to Will for finally subscribing to the channel, because he's a host on the channel. He should have been subscribed 3 months ago, but he's finally done that. Welcome, Will. And then also we've got a question from the Brand36. Not sure if that's our boy Branson Gibson, but he has asked, have Canberra fallen away big time, or do you think they were just overperforming at the start of the season? Obviously, they did come out of the blocks pretty aggressively. They had some very entertaining fixtures early on in the season. Michelle Heyman scoring quite a few goals in the opening month or so of the W League year. What do you think the reason is for some of their drop off over the last few weeks? Is it just purely related to the opening up of the competition and the intensity of fixtures coming thick and fast, or are we finding out that Canberra perhaps aren't as dominant or as big a side as we initially thought?
I think it's a little column A, column B there. Michelle Heyman's definitely a giant factor, and what a return to top flight football for Michelle Heyman after a year away. I think, as I said, it's been a tough run of fixtures. We talked about Sydney a couple of weeks ago on the pod. It was that New South Wales hub allowing them to dominate, and Canberra had more of a tough schedule on the road. But my apologies. They were at home for their first 5 games, and so I think that helped a little bit, and they were able to grind out some results and basically put goals in the back of the net at will to kickstart the season. And I guess they've struggled because they've had to go on the road a little bit more, and I don't know. Is it because Michelle Heyman hasn't been scoring either? So were they too over reliant on Michelle Heyman?
Look, I think this is gonna break this down into too much of a microcosm, but I think Canberra are good, and I'm a big rap for Vicky Linton. Like, I watch Vicky Linton's sides and the adjustments that she makes throughout the course of games, and she clearly is a very intelligent manager. And she clearly, I think, perhaps the best in the division, is dialed into what her squad can and can't do and how to make adjustments on the fly to deal with different threats or different passages of the game or whatever else. I think both Adelaide and Canberra I rate as being very actually similar teams. I've been very impressed with Wirtz for Adelaide United. I think Heyman's a similar sort of player, albeit one with a lot more W League experience. I think Flannery's excellent for Canberra. I think the likes of Dorber and other players, and Condon and whoever else we've mentioned for Adelaide as well, have also impressed quite a bit. I think their squads are very similar. I think the difference is that Adelaide have like that star power of Cote Rojas that they get to call upon, and she really has been quite a few different times. I think the difference between sides when they've played each other, they played a cracking contest, both teams against each other early on in the season in Canberra, and Adelaide could have gotten something from it if not for some absolute bangers in that match. But really, I think Canberra just need that one little creative spark, that one kind of, not superstar's a bit too harsh a word, but they need that one sort of flair player, that one catalyst that really, when teams are evenly matched, evenly balanced, can be the difference maker for them. And I think that's where the challenges come in. They needed one today. There were some excellent performances on that team. I think Grace Maher is a fantastic player and should definitely be involved in Matilda's discussions ahead of the World Cup campaign. I think Flannery has been excellent. They've got some grace pace off the bench as well in that Canberra squad. I think they're just lacking that little spark to kind of get the most out of it. But in reality, football ebbs and flows. Sometimes it is a flip of a coin as to who's going to get the 3 points. Sometimes luck does have to go your way. And Canberra have still been excellent, but Canberra's excellence may still not be enough to make the top 4 this season, given the truncated version of the season and the fact that they're up against sides like Melbourne Victory that have vast resources that they're trying to compete against. So I don't think Canberra would look at a 5th place finish and just missing out on finals as a terrible season, but also I think to get so close and then to drop off towards the end of the season, I think they'd be frustrated with. Of that run home, the games that you called out, how many of them are home fixtures for them at Viking Park? You're on mute again, so you're doing the classic Shaun that we call it now.
Oh, wonderful.
We'll call it 1-1. Just the fact is that mine went for 10 minutes and yours went for 2.5 seconds.
So it is Canberra United at home to Brisbane, away to Perth, away to Newcastle, and then an interesting game to round out the season. Canberra United versus Sydney FC in Canberra, and that is on the 26th. I'm just going to pull up the date there for a second. So that is a Friday night. I might be a little sick that night. But yeah, so a tough run to finish out the season, although the two tough games are at home. So that could prove to be a decisive difference there for Canberra.
Yeah, anything that we say here on these streams is conjecture, and Pizza Hut cannot take us to court in any way. But the fascinating part will be if they can get 3 points against Brisbane or Sydney, it's going to blow this final top 4 race wide open, because that would be, I think, a lot of against the other people's rule books. But I mean, if they lose both those games and only get 6 points of the remaining 12 on offer, I don't know if that's going to be enough for them to catch Adelaide or enough for them to catch Melbourne Victory, even though Melbourne Victory are a little bit trickier to kind of measure depending on how they're going to rock up each week. Okay, so it does kind of take us to the ladder. Do you want to jump into that stuff and we can kind of just run through each team and maybe give a little bit of feedback on each?
We can. So in first place, we have Sydney FC, 24 points. Brisbane Roar, second place, 19 points. Adelaide United, third place and 16 points. 14 and 12 respectively for Melbourne Victory and Canberra United. Western Sydney and 10 points in sixth place. Newcastle and City tied for seventh with 4 points, and Perth Glory rounding out the bottom of the table with one solitary point from their 6 games so far. That 6 points that we mentioned for Canberra United will only take them up to 18. If we have a quick look at the victories run home, that is at home against Western Sydney, away to Perth Glory, away to Sydney in a big blue double header on the 20th of March, and then at home to Perth Glory. Do we see Melbourne Victory being able to get 4 or more points from those 4 games?
I think Melbourne Victory can. I think Melbourne Victory also have the easiest run home. So we're now getting into philosophical territory here, Steven. So bear with me a minute if I just wax lyrical.
Yep.
Adelaide have got both Melbourne Victory and Canberra United both have games in hand on Adelaide. Adelaide have 3 games to finish their season, 3 weeks apart. This is kind of one of those old sort of questions that managers sometimes ask themselves, where do you really want to be just kind of like going into games, a 4 games over 3 weeks, just going into games, not really overthinking it, just playing your football, getting into your rhythm, whatever else? Would 4 games over a 3-week period be a preferred alternative, or is it better in Adelaide's instance to have games a week apart where they get to analyse their opposition, go out there and deal with specific threats, get a full training week, play their game, get rest, recovery, analysis again, training sessions to try and get them back out there again? I don't know in this instance. There's a part of me that thinks Canberra are probably going to be just an absolute wave of momentum after playing and potentially getting points against Brisbane, 2 winnable games, and then finishing off the season riding into Canberra again to finish off maybe their year against a high-flying potential champion Sydney FC. There's a lot of different ways that you could look at that. I think some people would say that Canberra United are going to have the better run, and Melbourne Victory in this same instance as well, where they've got 4 games remaining, all coming in a quick win span. And some people are probably going to think Adelaide United has the better run home because they're going to get more time between matches to analyse opposition and get their group together. Things like knocks, recoveries, all that sort of stuff's going to be that easy with the additional days. It's a fascinating run home. I don't know how many times throughout the course of W League seasons we've had such an imbalance in terms of the games played, with so many teams having played 9, so many teams having played 8, and Perth Glory is sitting there down at the bottom of the league only playing 6 times. There's a lot of football still to come throughout the last 3 weeks of this season. It's going to be very, very interesting. If it was me, and I hate to say it, I do think Adelaide are going to finish in the top 3. I think they'll be able to have good enough results to get something in those last 3 games. then it really just becomes a shootout between Melbourne Victory and Canberra, and I think Melbourne Victory have the better run home. I think Canberra having Brisbane and Sydney still to come makes it too big a variable and too big a liability that they're going to drop points throughout the course of those games and not be able to leapfrog it. So I'd give the edge to Melbourne Victory, but I would absolutely love to be proven wrong. If you were going to try and pick the final 2 spots in that top 4, who would you be going after?
So I was about to put you on the spot, but you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you and turned it back on me. I think it pains me as a Sydney FC fan to say this. I think that the Victory are going to run it out. I think it's just a slightly easier run home. There's no reason that they can't pick up 6 points against Perth Glory, who they play twice, which will basically put it out of reach unless Canberra can run the board and go 4 from 4. Be a disappointing season for Canberra, who have played some great football this season. It's going to make for a fantastic run home, and we highly encourage everyone watching right now to tune into the remaining games if the broadcaster lets us. Moving on, we are going to go to our first game of the day. I call this the foul game, where I throw out some topics relevant to Australian football and we grade them based on whether it's good, so no foul, not good, a foul, bad, a yellow card, or horrendous, a red card, which we saw a couple of this weekend, and we'll get into those later when we talk about the A-League. So first topic I'm going to throw out here. This season, expected goals is gaining a lot of traction as a stat. Does Australian football need it as a stat? Sean?
All right, so I've just quickly I've updated it from the traffic light game to the foul game because I obviously read the run sheet wrong earlier, but hopefully next week we'll be all prepped and ready to go. Look, you've thrown me a softball here because I've told you previously in confidence, in the privacy of like offline chats and whatever else, that I think XG is the most overrated stat in world football. Like, what was the game that happened the other night where you messaged me saying that if you ever needed evidence against XG? Was it the Wednesday night game or was it the Friday night game for Perth?
That was the Friday night game with Perth Glory.
Yeah, so
I have that. So I have that number here.
Yeah,
it was 0.88 expected goals for Perth Glory, who scored 3, and we're going to throw some more numbers at you. Perth Glory's expected goals this season 7.96. They've scored 18.
Like,
how if this stat is so good, how can there be a 10-goal buffer?
I have to apologise to Nick Gerber, like from A-League and part of the reserve team, because he does some phenomenal stats work. Nick's work is absolutely brilliant. He's the most professional of all of us semi-professional and amateur fans that are getting stuff out there for you guys. But I just think it's the most overrated stat in the world because it doesn't give you the additional context of like who the chance falls to. Like, the difference being was that on Friday night, the chances for Perth fell to Diego Castro, who could finish a chance in his sleep, and Bruno Fornaroli. Whereas the chances that fell to Brisbane fell to like Jack Hingett, their right back, or to, one of their defensive midfielders, or to a winger who can't score anyway. Like, their best chances weren't falling to Dylan Wenzel-Halls. Their best chances were falling to Golgo Mabratu, who couldn't score a goal despite there being 2 in his name. But like, that's the difference between XG. I just don't rate it that highly as a stat because I don't think it gives you the additional contextual detail as to like the ebbs and flows of a game, where chances are coming, and most importantly, who are those chances falling to? Because like a chance that might be a 2 or a 3 out of 10 time chance for Diego Castro, he's going to get that goal 8 or 9 times out of 10, just as that's his individual quality. That's how good his technique is. And I don't think that's accurately represented. Like, anyone that watched that game on Friday night would have walked away saying Perth Glory were good value for their win. Like, they were the better side throughout the course of the 90. They created the most chances. Their goals, particularly like, I think the second one, Fornaroli's finish, they were wonderful goals. Even Diego Castro's goal, excellently worked goal, very exciting stuff from them, and they were very good value. And then to turn around at the end, and XG's apparently said they were only supposed to score less than 1. Like, it's not necessarily A-League specific, and I know that was the way that you worded the question. I just don't rate it as a stat full stop as far as football is concerned, because I think one of my favourite parts about football, one of my I think most beautiful parts about football is there's so much contextual information. We don't want to be like the NBA where they measure the length of a guy's fingertips and that's important to how good he is at the game, because football is so much different to that. The best player potentially of all time is 5'6" and had growth hormone replacements as a child because he was too small, and he's out there every week playing up against against like 6'5", roided out central defenders and stuff. Everybody's got a place in the game, and I don't think you can quantify that statistically by the XG rating. But what are some of your thoughts on it? I could go on about this one, Stephen, for about an hour and a half. This is a straight red card as far as I'm concerned for XG.
Oh, we have our first red card in our opening episode. Wow. Apologies to all the statisticians out there. I knew this was going to get Shaun fired up. I didn't just realize how fired up it was. As you mentioned, we do need to give a shout out to Nick Gerver, A-League Apart on Twitter. I absolutely love reading his stuff. I love stats myself. I'm just going to call this a straight foul. It's not good. I don't think it's relevant to Australian football. I think, especially with the broadcast issues, I don't think we're getting the full story here, because the camera angles don't show everything properly. Like, if you compare that to European leagues, and even then just other sports, like the NHL does a great job with the expected goals because they have 20 different cameras at every single game showing everything. It may have its place in the future, but while we're under the current broadcast system, I don't think it has a place, just because you don't necessarily get the full story. Foul for me, red card for Shaun. Our next topic is taking overage players to the Olympics a good idea for the Olyroos. Graham Arnold has come out and said he's not going to take overage players. Should he, Shaun?
I think the fascinating part about this one is that because the Olympics was delayed 12 months, it's now under 24, not under 23. I think in an under 23 competition, there is value to it, particularly if your under 23 like group and recruitment or whatever else is like largely around like that 19-20 sort of age, which a lot of the squads and teams around the world will. I think because they can actually get players under the age of 24 now in that Olympic squad, it does actually kind of make sense to get rid of that rule and to not do it. There are, I think, still some areas where I think that Olyroos team could benefit from having like an older head. I think they could do with like a proper central defender, someone a bit more experienced. I think they could also do with a proper like defensive midfielder, number 6. That's really the one area I think they haven't got like a player who's playing at an elite level. Like Keanu Bacchus is apparently going to be the leading player for that number 6 position. Maybe Connor Metcalf, maybe your boy Callum Neuvenhoff, who I think thrives because he's got very good players around him as well. So I think they have a couple of spots where they could potentially use someone extra like that. Having said that, it depends what 24 he's going to go with. If he's going to pick the likes of Daniel Arzani, Riley McGree, Harry Sutar, who actually do qualify under that age bracket and are playing at very good levels, then yeah, great, let's get them all out there. Let's have those guys be the senior players and those guys like the replacement stars in that lineup. But if he is going to keep it relatively local, and a lot of his squads for Olyroos qualifying and all that sort of stuff were mainly made up of A-League players, then yeah, we probably do need to get some supplementary players, even if they are A-League players. Like it would be great to give like Alex Wilkinson a swan song competition to go there and be the experienced central defender amongst kind of like an older group to help guide them through. It'd be a great shout for, you know, some of the older heads that are back playing in the A-League as well. It really depends what direction Graham Arnold's going to go in. If he does it and then ends up calling like Andrew Redmayne up, I will lose my absolute shit and probably block him on Twitter for a couple of weeks because I won't be able to tolerate it. But if he's going to go about it the right way, I can see this working out really well. It just depends how deep is he going to go into that group of under 24 players we have, because we do have some talent there.
Well, so it might be hard because this doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of FIFA competition to get the likes of Harry Sutar away from their English clubs. You know, Arzani away from... Is he playing in the Netherlands again? I've lost track. He's moved so many times.
He's in Denmark. He's at AGF Aarhus now. Shout out to our huge Danish audience that are no doubt watching this one on demand.
Yeah. So I think that makes it tough. So you do have to kind of look towards the A-League. You mentioned the number 6 as a key role. I don't know if it's entirely possible, and this is going to sound very much like Sydney bias, but I still think one of the best number 6s that Australia has seen in the last few years is Brandon O'Neill, and he will qualify as an overage player, but is it worth trying to get someone of his caliber in to, because he's only had the one friendly against South Korea, to get him that international experience, even if it is against kids. It might just be a good stepping stone. At the end of the day, I'm going to trust Graham Arnold. And I know he has his detractors, but the fact of the matter is that he's a good coach. It hasn't always worked out for him. You know, the first time around, it was in the wake of the 2006 World Cup, and now it's very much a lot of his reign post the 2018 World Cup has been impacted by COVID. Reduced qualifiers, doing everything at once, which will be coming up at the conclusion of the A-League season. Just a lot of things have gone against Graham Arnold his entire time. For me, I'm going to give this no foul. I think it's good. I think that it shows that Australia has some level of depth and some level of talent, that we can have this discussion where getting the players' experience and the fact we have the good players to be able to do it. You mentioned Alex Wilkinson. He's only had 22 yellow cards in his entire 300 A-League games. So he is incredibly good at what he does. Where do you rate this, Shaun? Mute. Shaun, you're on mute.
Mate, like 2 or 3 times throughout the course of a 2-hour period. You tell it's been a long weekend and I'm exhausted with football, and our biggest games are still to come. That's going to be the challenge for us, mate. But yeah, look, I would agree with you. I would say, play advantage, play on, let the game continue. That's fine. Maybe this is one that we come back and revisit when we actually see what that Oilers squad is. And we should acknowledge as well, for our Japanese audience, understanding that they are still in pretty heavy lockdowns. It does remain to be seen if Tokyo is still going to go ahead. We hope it does. There is talk that it's also going to be a reduced competition, and maybe football is one of those things that doesn't necessarily happen, but it would be a massive shame, I think, for this crop of players who've done so well to qualify to not get their opportunity. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks, but I'm with you, mate. Let's let it play on and see how it goes, and hopefully we put a good squad on the park. Yep,
that sounds good. I did debate the idea of throwing a third topic at you, but we've got a lot of A-League games to get into, so we'll move on swiftly.
Yeah, we are actually at that point. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, so we're just going to give everyone a chance to kind of stretch their legs a little bit, to go and grab a drink, go to the bathroom, do whatever they have to do before we get stuck into A-League action, because you know as well as I do, Stephen, well, some of these games that we're going to talk about, there's a whole bunch that we have to unpack. So we're going to jump back into our Be Right Back screen. We'll be with you guys in about 5 minutes. All right, quicker break than expected, because we've got a couple of shout outs and stuff that we need to do as well. We've got to thank Rose Valente, our Overlord Saviour, for subscribing or following the channel. We will get monetization up in the next couple of weeks, which is hopefully going to lead to a few more subscribers and stuff like that. Some exciting things coming everybody's way, both here on Twitch and over on YouTube as well. But Stephen, halfway point, we've gotten through the W League fixtures. What are some of the things that you think were the biggest takeaways from this past weekend of football? There was a lot, and a lot, I think, on Twitter about people kind of recapping and saying how fantastic A-League and Australian football is at the moment. Do you have any overall thoughts or opinions on how we're travelling, kind of getting into the midway point of the season for a lot of people?
So I want to touch back on something we touched on in our W League discussion. For everything that the broadcaster is doing to hamper this product, the product on the field is speaking for itself. This has been one of the best seasons of the A-League. We have 6 games every week, home and away, 12-team competition. We're moving in the right direction in terms of that. I think I can maybe count on one hand the amount of quote-unquote dour games that we've had this season. Everything's it's either been chaotic or it's been brilliant, or to go back to the old slogan of 90 minutes 90 emotions during the early days of the A-League, and that's exactly what this competition is providing. It's providing twists and turns at every angle, and I'm absolutely loving it. The A-League is becoming much watched programming every single time there's a broadcast. It's getting a lot of international traction too, and that's only good for the league. I don't think this is a step back this season. I think this has been, 2 steps forward. And I think wherever the A-League ends up next season, broadcast-wise, competition-wise, whether that stays in summer, whether we move to winter, I think the competition is only going to be better for it. Because of COVID, there's been a lot more youth getting their chances. It's only creating the depth that the Australian national team will need in 10 years' time. I don't think I can say a bad thing about this season. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Oh, mate, I could go on for 2.5 hours, but what I think I'll do is let's jump in. Let's go through our 5 A-League matches from this past weekend, and maybe as we go through them, we'll touch on some of the stuff that you've just mentioned as well, setting up the league heading into the future, and some of the highlights for the individual clubs I think relate directly to what we would hope for teams heading into the future as well. So let's get stuck straight back in. And I'll hand over to you from there, mate. You can take us through the Perth Glory and Brisbane Roar game.
Yep. So we covered the Melbourne City Sydney FC game on our podcast recorded on Wednesday morning, released Thursday night. Please check that out. It is a wonderful listen. So it was recorded before the Melbourne Victory Wellington game. We will touch on that game in more detail as we move into the other side's games. 2 goals to Rudy Justed, proving the difference there, either side of half time. So we'll jump straight into the Perth Glory Brisbane Roar game. Perth Glory just can't stop scoring. The defense is improving as well. They're not conceding as many goals as they were in the early part of the season. Can they make it back to the finals? What do you think about that? Oh, sorry. 2 goals to Diego Castro, 1 goal to Bruno Fortaroli. I caught myself there before I got away from it. 1 goal to Jack Hingert for Brisbane. So a 3-1 scoreline there for Perth. What were your thoughts, and can Perth make it back to the finals?
Look, Perth are fascinating. They're really difficult to peg at the moment because they are one side in Western Australia and a completely different side away from home. So that actually, it's funny that you mentioned the goals that they've scored. The 18 goals that they've scored now is the highest of any team across the opening 6 games of a season, which is absolutely ridiculous. Then you take into the fact that they've also conceded 13. They've only got +5 goal difference. You'd expect them to be miles ahead of where they are, but that's where they're at the moment. They're going to play 4 up top, like 2 wide players and 2 central strikers. Some of them may change in different phases of players to where they're standing and where their starting positions might be, but they're just going to go after it, and they're going to try and get the ball to the man that you can see on screen at the moment, getting his left thigh out there for everybody to see, Diego Castro. He was the difference maker at this point. Brisbane have had a good start to the season, and again, I think very similar to Perth, one of the teams that are much, much better at home than they are away from home at the moment. I think the extra humidity, the fact they've moved out to Redcliffe, I think that's suited this Brisbane side quite a bit. The fact that you're a bit more exposed to the elements there as well, I think is benefiting them quite a bit. We spoke about in our season preview series with Perth, and shout out to the Soccer Podcast and all the guys that we had appear on that episode, that they really needed to turn HBF into a fortress if they were going to have any sort of success this season. It was a huge marker of their 1 premiership winning season under Tony Popovich, that they were really difficult to beat. And so far, they've been pretty good when they've played at HBF. And I think that was really the difference as well. The shed was full. It was rocking. It was fantastic to see all those people there safe standing and getting involved. Felt very weird as someone from Victoria, and probably for you as well, Stephen, in New South Wales, watching a full football crowd in an end. We haven't seen one locally for quite a while, but thankfully restrictions are easing and we are back on our right path. But yeah, look, Perth at home, they could beat any side in this division, which I think is a huge credit to them. They do still have to figure out, I think, how to go away from home and play a little bit more defensively not be as reliant on Diego Castro. But when you've got that weapon in your arsenal, it's very hard not to just want to give him the ball and see what he can do with it. But their second goal, as I've already mentioned, an absolute beauty, as good a team goal as you'll see throughout the course of this season. And on the flip side of the coin, Brisbane, their goal as well was absolutely fantastic. A really well worked passage of play, wonderful finish again. Good looping header back across the goalkeeper. So both sides playing fantastic football, both sides going out there and trying to win. And Perth's individual quality, I think, was the difference with this one.
Yep, I can't pick any fault with what you said. 75% crowd capacity here in New South Wales. So we and we'll get onto this later. I was at the Sydney FC MacArthur game, as we've already mentioned. It was good to see the Cove looking kind of full again, or as full as restrictions will allow it to be. So yeah, as we move back towards that, hopefully we can get back to 100% capacity here soon, and we'll be able to sell out. Cogra again. We'll be able to sell out, other stadiums here in New South Wales and hopefully in Victoria again soon. Because the crowds really do make a difference and help make that home ground advantage a home ground advantage. I want to touch on Brisbane here now. Only 1 goal for Brisbane in their last 4. Should they be worried?
No, because they haven't played at Redcliffe that often in their last 4, and I think that's going to make or break their season. I don't think even the most positive Brisbane Roar fan would have expected them to put together some of the quality performances that we've seen from them this year. I think they do have a couple of areas where their depth gets sincerely tested, and as this season goes on and people pick up more knocks and suspensions and all that sort of stuff, there will be challenges for Brisbane. I do think that, like Perth, they're going to be a different prospect at Redcliffe than they are away from home. So I think a lot of teams will be looking at Brisbane and the home fixtures and looking at it being winnable results. And then I think they think the away trip going to Redcliffe is going to be a big challenge for them. So I don't think Brisbane have to be concerned because I think they are still ahead of the curve in terms of where we expected them to be on the table at the start of the season. But having said that, I would also think that they will be disappointed that they didn't quite match Perth in a lot of areas with this park. They had some good players though. Rico Danzaki, and apologies because I've gotten the hiccups out of nowhere, audio listeners. Rico Danzaki was fantastic throughout the course of this contest. He was a bundle of energy. They had good width. Corey Brown was heavily involved in the goal. Jack Hinger actually scored it, so their wingbacks were getting flying into the box. On another day, they probably get more out of Dylan Wenzel-Halls. Weirdly, they mentioned in commentary, so take this with a grain of salt, it could be an absolute crock of shit, but they were talking about Dylan Wenzel-Halls working more with Scott McDonald and really trying to like hold up the ball more and get more involved in play, which isn't his strength. Just take the shackles off him, let him run in behind, let him try and take on 2 or 3 players, because when he was in form over the first month to 6 weeks of the season, he was absolutely immense to watch. So I would love to see them getting him back to that. And then the other portion as well, if we're going to focus on the negative, Golgon Mabratu didn't have the greatest game. I think if McDonald was playing, or potentially their Japanese striker, who we haven't seen much of yet in the opening few seasons, potentially some of those chances that fell to goal, maybe hit the back of the net and make this a more interesting contest. So don't panic, Brisbane fans. Your best is still ahead of you, but it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back this weekend.
Yep. Now, full disclosure, we do have a second game lined up here, but we're going to have to cut that for time this week.
Let's go through it. Let's go through it, mate. Like, yeah, why not? Like, I know we said we're going to cut stuff to try and stick for 10 o'clock, but like, let's face it, mate. You and I are the worst in terms of not sticking to our run sheets and our time codes. So we'll go through the matches and we'll see if we end up at 10:30. Okay. We end up at 10:30. Let's take the breaks off.
Okay, I will leave that. So there's your first clue. It is the first stat will be relevant to the Perth Glory Brisbane Roar game. So we'll move on to Saturday's double header, Western Sydney and Adelaide United, a thrilling 3-2 contest out at Wonderland. Shout out to Tyler Bischoff, and I will be cutting parts of this for him. For those of you who don't know, Tyler Bischoff, ESPN Las Vegas, does a fantastic job, and I absolutely love listening to him. Found out for the first time that Western Sydney Wanderers' home stadium is called Wonderland. That's the only credit I can give the Wanderers. Fantastic stadium. New South Wales government, who I don't like giving credit to, done a great job. Goals to Goodwin, Mork, and Mohamed Toure for Adelaide. Goals to Bruce Kamau and Mitch Duke for Western Sydney. Should Western Sydney have managed to get a point from this game?
Look, so first I have to give credit. I didn't actually watch this game live because I was at an NPL fixture supporting our boy Branson Gibson and Avondale getting a fantastic win against Oakley. So I watched this one as a mini match, and there's always like a really good indication that a mini match was an absolute cracker when the like highlights package that they've condensed down is still 25 minutes long. So yep. Fantastic to see that we are still getting 2 teams trying to go head to head. Western Sydney are a fascinating one because they actually hadn't actually conceded that many goals before this contest. However, any game where you're going to drop 3 goals against the side is always going to be challenging to try and get 3 points. So I don't think they'd be looking at it and saying, we should have gotten something out of this game. I think they'll be looking at it and saying, what do we need to do better to not concede that amount of goals? Having said that, for Adelaide United, flip side of the coin, they've been excellent at home and not great away. This is by far their best away performance this season. It was amazing to me. He's on screen at the moment, Craig Goodwin, getting a goal in return, albeit a scrappy kind of half-deflected shot from the edge of the area. It was amazing to see just his involvement in that squad. Seemed to be a real lift for everybody in that Adelaide lineup. It was like they were waiting for kind of like that superstar signing to really hit the ground running. It hasn't worked out quite as well for their other huge off-season signing, Tommy Urich. They look better, I think, with Al Hassan and Mohamed Toure out there on the park. They look more mobile, they look more fresh, they take players on more regularly. So big questions to be asked of Adelaide over the next few weeks. What's Carl Vart going to do? Is he going to stick with this young Toure-led lineup where they do play a very exciting, expansive brand of football that opens up space for the likes of Stefan Mork, Ben Halloran and the great man Craig Goodwin? Or are they going to kind of revert to form a little bit and try and use Urich a little bit more at Hindmarsh? So yeah, great result, great performance. Credit to both sides for continuing to go out and try and win the match. That's what we want to try and see from all of our sides. Probably a few, heartaches there for both Western Sydney and Adelaide fans. It's tough to watch when your team plays like that. But yeah, an excellent, I think, game. And if it wasn't for one of the games we're going to talk about in a moment, like what a wonderful endorsement for the league itself, the kind of highlights that were going on in this one. But a bit more on that one when we get to it.
Yeah, so you did briefly touch on where I was going to go next, moving on to talking about Adelaide United. Do we know what this Adelaide team is? And at 4-1-4 on the season, do they know what they are? Are they must watch because anything and everything can happen in an Adelaide United game this season? We've seen them grind out some amazing results. We've seen them dominate teams. We've seen chaos. We've seen the cop absolute drubbings. And are they must watch?
Not must watch. We spoke about when we did like our season preview, and I think you're on that week's episode of the podcast, where each of the young coaches that haven't necessarily done like long-term WMPL or MPL like apprenticeships, or even like youth league apprenticeships at A-League level, each of them was going to have games throughout the course of the season where they learned something about their squad. Warren Moon has definitely learnt lessons about Brisbane at various points throughout the year. Melbourne City beating them early on, I think he learnt quite a bit about how they had to play and how they had to deal with certain threats. I think Carl Vart has learnt quite a bit with this Adelaide United squad, and it is very young, don't forget. Like, Louis Dorigo, he's still only 19, and he's probably the first name on the team sheet for them every single week, such as his importance to their style. They've still got Noel Smith at left fullback. They've still got a variety of young players in and around the squad, not even mentioning the two Ray brothers who proved to be one of, I think, the most exciting like young prospects in and around the league at any club. So I think Adelaide fans, not necessarily must watch. I think they're learning more about their squad week by week, but what they'll want to be playing their best football and really hitting their straps going into the right part of the season, which is finals. If they finish outside the top six, I think they'll be very disappointed given the talent and the ability that they've set on display, but there are some teams behind them that are looming a little bit large. Their run over the next month or so will determine quite a bit for them, because I think it's the first time in a few weeks where they've got 2 home games and 2 away games. So if they can start putting on consecutive back-to-back results, like a good away performance here and then a good performance at home and then maybe a good away performance and a good performance at home again, that will like really show that growth. And if they get that consistency, then they'll become a much-watched team, because you know what you're going to get with them each and every week. Sometimes watching Adelaide is a bit of a struggle, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily put them in that category just yet. But having said that, they're a young team and a young coach, and they're continuing to grow and get better each week.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I can't think of anything to add to that. Move on to the other Saturday night game. We are going to talk about Melbourne Victory versus Western United. How much of an endorsement that was for the league is absolutely amazing. A 4-3 thriller, 2 goals to Victor Sanchez and 2 to Barisha for Western United. Goals to McManaman, Butterfield and Justed, who scored 3 goals this week. Before we talk about how amazing the football was for Victory this week and how it's turned their season around, I have to ask, did Robbie Cruz take a dive?
So yeah, he did. I think actually the other thing that we have to do, because there might be people listening in or watching this as like a video on demand that didn't actually see the order in which those goals were scored as well. So Western United went 3-0 up, was it? Or was it 2-1 and then 3-1? And then
it was 1-1, then it went to 3-1, then it went to 3-all, then it went to 4-3 with the 95th minute winner for Victor Sanchez.
Yes, and in between that, right, the part that you're alluding to, so I think it was 3-2 Western United was up at this point. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it was 64th minute, red card to Thomas Uskok in the 64th minute.
Yes.
The second yellow.
Second
wasn't
yellow,
a straight red.
not a straight red, and that's it. That's important for the parts that we'll get through here in a moment as well. So Robbie Cruz was away, he was through, he was beyond him, and then all of a sudden feels like the slightest touch on his shoulder, and for whatever reason that impacted his like legs and ankles ability to work. It should have gone back to a VAR review, and this is what we spoke about in the podcast this past week, where there's not enough control in the hands of the referee. The referee should have been able to tell himself, I want to go and look at a video replay of that incident. And if he had gone over and seen that there was no ankle to ankle or foot to foot contact that would have impeded Robbie Cruz from actually continuing his run, he throws his hands back up in the air, he kicks his ankles out from underneath him, and he hits the deck, and he fools the referee into giving Tomislav Uskok an undeserved second yellow card. Usually, Steven, I would turn around and say that needs to be looked at or that needs to be rescinded or whatever else. But the football gods, for whatever reason, were feeling in a very just and comfortable and giving mood today, where the eventual result, that 5-4 victory, is tremendous. So after that result, that red card, Western United go down to 10 men. They actually do okay for about 5 minutes. And then Melbourne Victory continued to come forward. Jacob Butterfield, as you mentioned, scored an absolute screamer on his wrong foot, which was a brilliant strike. They then go kind of back and forth, both sides trying to get forward. Western United, to their credit, going after it. Getting caught in transition, Lachie Wales standing on the ball about 5 metres outside his own 6-yard box, which you never want to see. Their young fullback, is it Markovic? I've forgotten his name. Apologies if it's not Markovic. Hangs the ball in the area. The giant Rudy Gestead powers ahead of home. Melbourne Victory, it looks like they've come back from 3-1 down to draw 4-4. And then late drama ensues. More goals continue to come. Western United, with literally the last kick of the game, the last second of 5 minutes of injury time, go up the other end. It's a great ball back into the box. Dan Milanovic, I probably butchered that name, throws himself at a header. The keeper spills it and falls to Victor Sanchez, who smashes home on his wrong foot into the side netting for a 5-4 victory. The last second of the game. The fantastic image you guys can see on the screen there is the pylon was all the Western United fans. And, not fans. No fans invaded the pitch. I've got to be clear about that one. But players and staff and coaches jumping in for that pylon right at the end. Like, there's only so many things that we can add about this one. It was just an absolute spectacle. It was a phenomenal match. I've written Game of the Season as the headline underneath the image that you guys can see here, because in reality, like, the drama, this game had literally everything. It had red cards, it had cracking goals, it had penalties, it had spite, had a bit of fire to it, it had a decent-ish crowd. The Melbourne Victory faithful, I think, getting behind their team really for the most vocal period of this season so far. But yeah, just an absolute cracking contest. And if this game hadn't happened, we'd be talking about Western Sydney and Adelaide being a fantastic advertisement for the league. This game is exactly why you need to be watching the A-League each and every week. It was absolutely fantastic.
It was a good Saturday for the A-League. I do need to correct you on something.
Yep.
I talked about VAR. Now, unfortunately, VAR cannot look at second yellows when they lead to a red card, and this is a fault with the system. That if you're going to persist to it, I think you need to look at second yellows getting upgraded to a red, resulting in a red card. Need to be able to be looked at and looked, because it does have an impact on the pitch. If it can go back and look at a straight red, it should be able to do the same for a second yellow turning into a red card. I did allude to my thoughts on that with the way I worded the question. Probably Chris dived. I don't think it's anything else. I think it's, to be fair, he's doing what all football players are taught to do as they're coming through the ranks, from under sixes all the way up, is you feel contact, you go down. And that's just an unfortunate indictment of the way the game was played for so many years. That's what I was taught. The first penalty I ever won inside the box, now, I was genuinely taken down. I had studs go up against the back of my leg. But the fact of the matter is that afterwards, everyone had thought I'd taken a dive from the opposition, including my own coach, who went, "Good job, you stayed down." I'm like, I got tackled. I couldn't feel my legs underneath me. I went down because I was forced down. It's just a sad indictment of the way the game was done in the past, and we're seeing that here, and maybe in the next 10 years that happens less. I have no idea, but so that's the VAR portion of this podcast dealt with. This live stream dealt with. If you want to find out more about our thoughts about VAR, go listen to the podcast we did this last week. As I said before, cracker of a listen. And if not, you at least get to see Branson Gibson eating a fly. That's worth it alone. Talk about the victory for a second. A team that didn't look like they were going to be competing at all. They've been in 12th for most of the season here. The games against Wellington Phoenix and Western United, have they got their season back on track? And did they deserve to lose this game?
Yeah, I think they did deserve to lose the game, to be completely honest. I thought they were second best in this one. We should actually let's talk a little bit about the Wellington match, where they finally figured out if we just punt high balls into the area, Rudy Cascade, by way of being a foot taller than everybody else, will be able to head them home. I cannot believe it's taken them 7 or 8 games to figure that one out, but they've finally gotten there. Wellington, their defending was pathetic. The first corner you can kind of understand because he had a man advantage and he's being marked by, for whatever reason, a midfielder in Alex Rufo, who's not their best header of the ball by any stretch. But then the second time, to have the exact same ball in the exact same box, into the same area, into the 6-yard box, and land on Gustado's head again, that's unforgivable. So Wellington 100% deserved to lose that. Victory deserved to win by way of making use of their advantages and their talents and whatever else. This game in particular was slightly different. I think this is the best Robbie Cruz game we've seen in the A-League. I thought he was like arguably Victory's best player on the night and a continued weapon. I think they do need to maybe get a little bit more out of some of their defensive players. If you go back and watch the final goal, like in injury time, in the last few seconds, trying to hang on for a point, potentially trying to get the ball back and go up the other end and get a winner of your own. Storm Ruse called ball watching, and that really gives Victor Sanchez a 2-foot head start to go and poke the ball home and win and get the winner. So I think there's still massive improvements for Victory. I don't think anyone should look at the past week and say that they played well against Western United and got 3 points against Wellington and they've turned a corner or anything. I think there is still a lot for them to learn and a lot for them to get better at, but they've got 3 points on the board, and I think that was a big part for their fan base. As critical as I am of Melbourne Victory and their fan base throughout the course of our content and whatever else, a good Victory side and a vocal Victory support is fantastic for the league, and it is amongst the best in the division once it's up and about and going. So we do want to see them doing well. Now that they've got that 3 points, hopefully they do go on and get some more points throughout the course of the season to give their fans something to cheer about. But I would advise everyone to err on the side of caution, because they will have bigger tests throughout the course of this season, and they will have bigger games where they are going to have to be up against it, and they're going to need to figure out how to have that same defensive output that they are getting out of some of their forward players, the likes of McManaman, Cruz, whoever else.
Yep. And courtesy of the game we're going to talk about in about 10 minutes or so, Melbourne Victory are back at the bottom of the table.
Yeah.
2-0 victory for Wellington over Newcastle. So still, as you said, still a long way to go for the victory. It is good for them though that they kind of found something that works. If we're talking about 4 points here, they're still in 11th, 4 points from these two games instead of the 3 points. I think Victory is still going to miss the finals. I think they've got too much ground to make up. Even though we're still only about a third of the way through the season, and we have seen other teams make a run in the past. Adelaide of 2015-16 comes to mind. They went on that run from about 10 games in and just basically stayed undefeated for the rest of the season. I just think with all the problems that Victory have, I think the inexperience of Brebner as a coach, I just think it's going to catch up to them, and they're not going to make the finals, which is disappointing for one of the big clubs in Australia, as their fans always like to pump up the biggest club in Australia. It's almost like, to use an American sports term, they need to go through a rebuild and kind of get back to where they are. I want to throw this question at you, and I think we talked about this on the podcast. It could have been off screen. I don't remember. Do they look at getting Kevin Muscat back if Brebner doesn't work out this season?
Look, no, because I think their continued going back to the same well is what's gotten them into this problem in the first place, and I think they are starting to realise that. I think they were in a position where they just kept re-signing Mark Milligan and Rojas and Tracy anytime they became available, or anytime they had other international or, in some cases, domestic moves fall through. And I think they've reached a point of no returns on that, where that group of players is too old. Apparently, and this is only alleged because it was on, I think it was Mr. Walker or whatever, the fake agent account on Twitter, was saying that Victory were offered Mark Milligan and didn't want him, and that's why he ended up at MacArthur. So I think they have learnt that lesson, if that is true. At the same time, I don't think they want to go back down that path. There's been a whole lot of stuff. It's been a pretty tumultuous past 7 days for the Victory. They've gotten wins, but they just paper over some of the other stuff. They've had a foundation... Apologies, hiccups are back again. They've had a foundation board member and a key investor of the club actually depart, and he's been there since 2005. So it wasn't just necessarily that he's left and moved on, because that does happen off the field. It was the manner in which he left and how he echoed a lot of frustration and gave us kind of a window into how difficult things are under Anthony DiPietro. And then also the club came out and said that they kind of slated him on the way out a little bit in one of those generic responses that comes out and says he has departed, we're going to address this now, he's left. But then it was like they included a portion saying that like he had poor attitudes about the club and personnel there and whatever else, and like that doesn't cast anybody in a positive light when people within a club, and like there's no way that the public would know about any of that unless the club addressed it and unless the club brought it out. So I don't know if there's something big that's happened, a big blow up that they thought was going to get traction and that they thought people were going to start talking or writing about in the media, and they thought they'd get ahead of it. But it makes no sense to me why Melbourne Victory would go and a guy that's put money into that club for the best part of 16 years and turn around and kind of like kick him on the way out as he leaves and departs. It makes no sense to me. So there's a lot going on at Melbourne Victory. I think if they do, it's purely because Anthony DiPietro had a good working relationship with Kevin Muscat, and Kevin Muscat towed the board's line for quite a while. I would be more inclined to think that they'd be looking at someone like Tony Popovich, where they're not looking to go back to what they were in 2015. They're looking forward to become something different again. So I think Popovich and Muscat both now being on the open market is interesting. I would think Kevin Muscat will probably look at trying to get himself an assistant or perhaps like an academy coaching job in the UK, where he does have pretty strong links to Millwall. I would expect Tony Popovich to come back, and it wouldn't shock me if Melbourne Victory look at him as someone that they want to try and bring back in to build towards the next dynasty. I think, as you mentioned, they need a good rebuild. They need to start again from scratch. I think they need to appoint a manager who has a long-term vision for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and then they have to work towards that and have faith in that particular person to lead them on the field, so to speak. I don't think Grant Brevin is that person, but I don't think Kevin Muscat is either. I think there's a point of diminishing returns into what you're going to get out of Kevin Muscat at this point. So which do you think? What are your thoughts? Who do you think Victory look at as their next coach?
So I think that in terms of the way this the resignation of the board member, I think it's one of those ugly divorce situations where no one comes out on top. But there's that breakup where it's like, for those of you familiar with the Reddit thread, "Am I an arsehole?" Or "Am I the arsehole?" You've got the three options of "Am I the arsehole?" "No, you're not." "Everyone sucks here." I think this is an everyone sucks here kind of situation. There's no winners here. No one comes out looking good. For the next coaching situation, I think if Brebner can get them anywhere near the 6, I think he might get another year or two. Tony Popovich presents an interesting one, because this will be the third club he's coached. The 5th club he's coached since departing.
No, you're right. I think you were right the first time. I think you're right the first time.
So since starting at the Wanderers, this will be his 5th club, 2 in Europe and 3rd in the A-League if he goes to the Victory. It presents an interesting dilemma. I've made no secret that I have my own issues with Tony Popovich that have absolutely nothing to do with what he's done here in the A-League. It's strictly a personal thing. For all that credit, he is a fantastic coach. He knows he knows how to get the best out of his players until he doesn't. But that's the way things go with a lot of coaches, especially in Europe. He knows how to get the best out of them. They know how to get the best out of their players until they don't, and that usually results in the coach getting sacked, because you can't sack or cut the contract of a Leo Messi or a Ronaldo or a Sergio Aguero or whoever it may be. And so Popovich could turn them around.
The reason I think Popovich is desperate to get that championship. He's never won a toilet seat. He's got 2 or maybe 3. I think 2 minor premierships, or premierships as we call them in Australia, 2 league titles and the big dinner plate. But he's never got that championship. He's lost with the Wanderers and he lost with Perth, albeit by way of a Brendan Santalab chip that never should have happened. But I think he's got things. I think he's got things to prove in the A-League. I think he's going to want to come back at some point and really kind of silence the doubters to say that he can win the big one. And then at the same time, I think Melbourne Victory really need that coach that's going to have that long-term philosophy. Personally, I think Tony Popovich is a good manager, but he's very defensive. I don't think he plays. I don't put him in the same tier as the best managers that have ever been in the league. Not taking anything away from his Asian Champions League triumph, which absolutely should be celebrated because it's a phenomenal tournament performance. It's probably the best that we will ever see in Australian football, but he's not the be-all and end-all as far as the A-League's concerned. He wins things on the back of being hard to beat, not by way of being particularly great or particularly winning a lot. So I think That's why I think he's more likely to go to Melbourne Victory, where he's going to get the opportunity to build something over a 3 or 4 year period. And then I could see him winning that championship and walking out the next day and going back to another ill-fated move in a second-tier European competition, because he just doesn't learn. He didn't learn after Turkey. He's not going to learn after Greece, and he'll probably sign his sons if he comes back to Victory anyway. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. But I don't... we should also acknowledge as well, Grant Brebner not sacked. They've not come out and like given him the dreaded vote of confidence or anything like that. They may be content just to kind of let this season play out and get some of the youngsters out there. I'm not really sure. Maybe we'll talk about this more when we look at the A-League ladder. I don't know who around the Melbourne Victory they think they're better than. I don't know if they are better than Newcastle or better than Wellington. I don't think they're as good as Western United. I don't think anyone has a player the quality of Diamante in their squad. Maybe Castro's a shout, but he was better 3 years ago than he is today. So, yeah, I don't know who you would say Melbourne Victory is a better side than of any of the teams that I would expect to be in the bottom half this season.
Yeah, and touching on Diamante, this going back to the now trashing David Gallup mini segment that we're going to go on here. What the hell were the FFA thinking when they wouldn't fund Diamante? He's been excellent for the league these last 2 years. You know, that David Gallup buzzword of metrics. I mean, I've seen more coverage focused on Diamante this year than I have seen any other player individually. You know, that's metrics. That's what the league wants, you know, or what they wanted at the time. They could have had it 3 years ago when he was a better player. You know, you mentioned Castro. You know, Diamante, you know, players do get worse as they age. You know, Ninkovic is not the same player he was 3 years ago. You know, to think we could have had a better version of Diamante 3 years ago than we do now seems almost ridiculous.
Well, this is the thing, and sorry to interrupt you, but like I tweeted about this. He doesn't look like a 37-year-old man, and he doesn't play like a 37-year-old man. He plays like a 22-year-old. Like, he plays with like a courage and I think like a vigor that, yeah, he gets away with a lot in Western United's system. He's not asked to do a lot without the ball. He still does it though, because he's a captain and he's a leader and whatever else. But like in the build-up to that winner, it's his back heel that beats 3 Victory defenders to allow, and I'm not sure who the player was, I apologise if it was like Skadatis or whoever, who actually puts the cross in. But like, Diamante does that on a whim, and he did that 6 or 7 times throughout that contest. Like, I have a feeling Diamante we're going to see play well into his 40s in this division. But 100%, like, I echo your sentiment. Thank God the Gallup era is over. A man who should have nothing to do with football or any sport in general again, given how terrible he's been in both codes that he's managed over the last kind of 10 to 15 years of his career. But thank God we've got football people involved now. But yeah, it's a shame we didn't get more of him, but there is also a part of me as a Melbourne City fan. I'm sure you'll echo this as a Sydney fan as well, that I'm so glad he hasn't been at Melbourne Victory for the last 5 years, because they would have been an incredible side throughout that period if he had been added there. So hopefully we get plenty more of him over the next few weeks. Next few years. I don't think he's slowing down anytime soon. And poi bow to all of our friends listening in from Italy and that part of the world.
Yeah, I hope we have Diamante for a while. A great player who is only bringing good things to the league, and that's what you want. You want the foreign imports to be bringing good things to the league.
Well, speaking of actually bringing it to the league, he's also going to be bringing it to the Apple Isle, as of news that we heard throughout the course this week. Do we want to touch on the Tasmania stuff for Western United at all?
Yes, we can definitely touch on that. I was about to transition nicely into that. As producer trying to get one up on the host, I think it may still be a little bit bitter. I think it may still be a little bit bitter about me taking the hosting gig here. So Western United announced that over the next 2 seasons they're taking 4 games to Tasmania. I did send in our this happened off screen a couple of days ago. I did send to a few people that I did message Sportsbet. I put it out there now. An unnamed gambling company as to whether we could get a market up to whether Western United would play a game outside of Australia and New Zealand. I should say a home game outside of Australia and New Zealand before they play one at their stadium in Tarnay. Apologies to any Melburnians if I butchered that town's pronunciation.
It's Tarnay. We just say it the way it's written down. We're not that cultured like you Sydney snobs.
Tarnay, sorry. So they're going to play 4 games in Tasmania. A deal struck with the Tasmanian government will see this happen. I think this is the only good thing, though, despite the jabs I just took at Western United about how long it's taken to get their stadium, which was the selling point for them getting into the league. I definitely think this is going to be a great thing for the league. It's more exposure. My only concern with this is that the Tasmanian government is using this as a bargaining chip to try and get that much alluded AFL team that they've been after for a number of years now, instead of just getting rewarded with a handful of Hawthorn and Kangaroos games. Do you think that's what's happening here, or should we just take it on its merits that the league's, taking that stance of expanding into Tasmania and trying to get exposure there, which may just eventually result in an A-League team anyway?
No, so there's kind of two layers to this one. I think basically, like, if you had to ask any A-League football fan where they wanted to see football, I think there's a few different places on the list, but I think people would have been saying, we need to get an A-League side in Wollongong and we need to get an A-League side in Tasmania, somewhere down the line. Maybe not everyone's top two, but no one would have turned down in that team. I don't think anybody deliberately...
Sorry to interrupt you for a sec. My top two were Canberra and Tasmania. Make it basically a national competition outside of the Northern Territory. Continue.
Yeah, no, mine were the same, actually, funnily enough. But, Wollongong's fantastic. I don't think anybody would have turned around and think Wellington's going to relocate to Wollongong and play a season there, and I don't think anyone was asking for Western United to go down to Tasmania. I think it's slightly different. I think, so Tasmania, for those of you who aren't aware, small island, it looks like pubic hair just south of Victoria on the eastern coast. It basically has the highest percentage per capita of football players, and by football, like soccer, I don't mean any of the other codes, of any state. So per capita and per children playing sport, most of those, the highest percentage of any state is actually within Tasmania, which is crazy. There's only, I think, 800,000 people in Tasmania, about 300,000 in Hobart, the capital, and they've got like 47% participation rates for people under 18 playing football, which is absolutely mind-boggling that it's that big, and they've got some big clubs, the likes of Clarence United, the likes of South Hobart, Devonport Strikers, Launceston City, all those clubs, shout out to all of them. I think what this actually is it's not necessarily reflective of their desire to get AFL down there. I think they've given up on that portion, but what I do think they're trying to do is to try and get some of the Women's World Cup games. So what they're trying to do is not necessarily get A-League fixtures on a long-term basis, but if they can get and prove that there's an audience there, that they can get 10,000 people to Launceston to watch Western United play, that they can get some desperately needed state and federal government assistance to upgrade the UTAS Stadium in Launceston so that it is one of the host locations for the Women's World Cup. I think that's their long-term aim. If they don't get that funding, though, I don't think they can get the standard of stadium up to where it needs to be to host a World Cup event. I would love to see some group stage games in that location. Power to them if they get 2 or 3 games. I don't think they're going to get any finals or anything, nor do I expect them to ask for it. But at the moment, the challenge that they've got is Blundstone Stadium in Hobart. Big oval. It's where the Hobart Hurricanes play. And UTAS Stadium, the one in Launceston, their biggest stadium, is also an oval shape. So I think they're trying to get some sort of development, and it'd be more like Etihad Stadium, where they've got like movable stands that can host both oval events and rectangular events. I think that's what they're pushing for. I think it's more driven by eventually looking towards the World Cup than particularly looking towards AFL. But again, I could be 100% wrong. That we could turn around in 3 weeks' time and they announce like the Hobart Hurricanes AFL franchise or whatever else, and they've got what they wanted. But I do think there is a genuine interest in football there, and I do think they are doing it for the right reason, which is what we're asking for everybody in the football community, is to start building something towards the legacy of the World Cup program. So I hope it's a success. I honestly do. Even though Western United aren't my favourite team, and the less said about their coaching structure, the better, I do hope that they make this a successful thing. I hope Hobart rallies around these games, gets out there, supports them. I hope they get the development for the 2023 World Cup, and then I hope they leverage that development to then get themselves an A-League license or a National Second Division license in the next round of expansion. So I'm choosing to remain optimistic with this one, Stephen, but I've been proven wrong many, many times before.
No, I want to stay optimistic with this as well. And to what you said, the less said about their coaching staff and their coach and their alleged approach to certain things, the better. As I said, I want to see Tasmania get an A-League team. I think that of the major codes that we have here in Australia, they're the best place to do so, just because the A-League is still at a point where we can expand, not at will, but it's a lot easier for us to expand. The AFL still has their structure set in place. The NRL does as well, and by all accounts, there's not really a lot of interest for rugby league in Tasmania. So, of the competitions, best place to do it is football, and I think that the A League and potentially W League can do it as well. We've seen, you mentioned the crowd, the participation numbers. If they can get 5 figures to a game, that's only going to be good. You said the funding is where it's going to be an issue. The Tasmanian government has said in the past that whichever code comes here first will put money towards the stadium, and that's something that you don't necessarily see here in Australia all that often, where most of the big stadiums are still government owned. You see that a lot in American sports, where it's like, hey, they try to get private investors in. It's like, look, we'll fund, X amount of your stadium. It's easier to go on this little tangent here with American sports because that's where the most credit is. It's not to take away from football, and I'll be off this tangent quickly. When the Raiders were looking at, and Mark Davis was looking at relocating from Oakland, Las Vegas was the city that turned around and said, look, we'll give you the $750 million to build a new stadium because we want another professional sports team in Las Vegas besides the Vegas Golden Knights. We want an NFL team. We'll give you the money. And it's an absolutely beautiful stadium because the Las Vegas government thought that they were going to get that back in luxury taxes from the hotels, and all this stuff for the visiting fans. And then COVID happened, and suddenly the government doesn't necessarily have the money to withstand the losses of $750 million stadium build. And Mark Davis is like, well, what do you want me to do? You promised me this is the contract, we're sticking to it. So I think the fact that the Tasmanian government is prepared to commit money to it and have a team play out of a government-owned stadium, much like the way it works here in Australia, is a good thing, which means they'll be invested into the long-term success of any potential A-League or W-League team, which can only be a good thing for the game, is to have more people believing in the future of the competition. Do you have any more thoughts, or can we move on to a game that I don't particularly want to talk about, but we have to?
No, I mean, shout out to Hobart Away Day. I think we're all very excited about, but I think we've given a ton of time to the Victory and Western United fans. We are definitely going to try and fairly go and discuss as best we possibly can the 1-0 victory to Macarthur earlier this afternoon. But you were the man that was there, so why don't you tell us more about this game and what it was like from a fan perspective?
So Matt Derbyshire scored a wonderful goal, backing off some horrendous Sydney defense. I have no idea how, and I don't remember who made the assist. So my apologies there.
Do you want to fill you in? It was Markel Susueta, and if you go back and watch the footage of that one, I don't know if the defending could have done much about it. This was like video game trick shot type shit that he was pulling out with this one. It was so that Markel Susueta played for Melbourne City, and the entire time I was like, what is this guy? Like, he's got this great pedigree of being this phenomenal player, but he looks underdone. He doesn't look ready to go. Do yourself a favour, if you haven't seen this one, go and watch his assist for this game. It's a tap in from Matt Derbyshire. His name is going to be on the score sheet. It's unfair because I think Markel Susueta beat probably about 6 Sydney defenders on his way to the byline. And then when Andrew Redmayne stood up in front of him, he side-footed it across to Matt Derbyshire to rifle it into the roof of an empty net. But by all means, continue. A phenomenal assist. It was absolutely fantastic.
It was. I think my complaint about the defending was that Susueta was allowed to get around so many defenders. Like, when Sydney FC is supposed to have good defending, and yet that happens. And that's not to take away from the class of what Susueta did. So that goal took place in the 36th minute. 2 minutes later, a straight red card for Paulo Retre. A warranted red card. I didn't think this at the time in the stands. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kogarah, there's one screen at the ground. I probably have a better screen in the other room for my TV than the one that they provide at Kogarah to see this. So sitting in the stands, we didn't know what the card was for or who it was for. and it took a long time to work that out. And it was only once I was able to pull my phone out at halftime and go back and watch it that I was able to see exactly what happened to her and who it happened to, and it was completely warranted. Sydney almost looked better once they went down to 10 men. It had plenty of opportunities to draw level. Sydney FC have got to stop hitting the woodwork. That's been their bane in recent weeks, is they keep on bashing the woodwork as opposed to hitting the net. Talking about Sydney FC, do Sydney know what they are as a team, and do we, or as fans, or Steve Corica know what his best starting 11 is?
Was that a question for me, or is that for Steve Corica? I don't think he's in the chat, but it'd be one that you'd have to force towards him.
I mean, we can, if Steve Corica wants to chime in, later, someone sends this to him on Twitter, by all means. If the chat wants to pop in, Shaun can read out your comments there. But yeah, it was directed at you, Shaun.
Look, I don't, but what I'm going to ask you to do, right? I have to step away for 2 seconds just to go to the bathroom. But what I want you to do is for all the Sydney FC fans to get your perspective and understand what you're going through. I would love for you to run through your starting 11, starting at the back all the way through, to kind of describe to people what you think Sydney FC's best lineup is. And then once you've done that, let's kind of go through some of those players and talk about, some of the prospects, maybe what we're seeing and what Steve Corica isn't at the moment. Because I think we're going to agree on a couple of different things, but I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Yep, no worries. So I'm going to do this on the fly here, and I will be writing it down in front of me. So apologies for this. So I got Redmayne in goals. I think the back four is pretty set as it is. So you got Ryan Grant, Wilco, McGowan, who is looking a lot better since his return. I think King has done enough in the left back slot to show he's a lot better than Michael Zullo, and has absolutely done enough to keep it regardless of what happens. The two number sixes is an interesting equation here, because it's Rattray aside today is a great player, and so you're trying to fit 3 into 2 here, possibly even 4 into 2 if you want to look at Harry van der Sar, right back by trade, but has absolutely done a job at number 6 when he's needed to step in the past. I think I got to go Bratton on the right side of the two number 6s, and I think Callum Neuenhoff has done enough to show that he deserves to take that left side. And he's going to get a couple of run of games here, because we don't know exactly what's happening with Bratton's concussion that he suffered on Tuesday night. Oh, sorry. I don't think it was diagnosed as a concussion. I got to say head injury that he suffered on Tuesday night against Melbourne City. We've seen what Neuenhoff can do in the Champions League and throughout this season. Going on to the two number 10s here, Ninkovic is there. That's an obvious one, and I think I'd be getting run out of town if I said anyone but Ninkovic on the left side there. Caceres and Bum Johan, during our season preview, if I recall correctly, I said they're very much the same player. Those two being able to slot in and out at will should be fine, and we've seen that this season. I'm gonna give the jump to Caceres just because I think Caceres is a slightly better player, and we haven't seen Bum Johan string enough together in recent times for that. The striking dilemma is a fun one for me. The two number 9s. Now, a player that I am very high on is Luka Vanovic, who seems to have dropped off the face of the earth at the A-League level. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors at the training field every day, what Steve Corica sees. This insistence with Barbarouses, who has improved in the last few weeks, but still had a number of chances today against MacArthur that probably should have capitalised on. I don't quite know if it's just the fact that the marquee wages are saving him. We've heard Corica say that he's extremely happy with what Barbarouses is doing. I can't see it. So Corica obviously knows how he wants to play. Then you got Bahaja. who's looking good. You've got Patrick Wood, you've got Geordie Swibble, then you've got Bobo, who I was under the impression was signed simply as a bench option to provide that depth experience off the bench. But we saw him starting his second game back against Melbourne City. I don't see. Essentially, we're trying to fit 6 into 2, but if you're looking at it from Corica's perspective, trying to fit 5 into 2, because I don't think he rates Ivanovic as a player. Hopefully, Ivanovic can get a good run in the NPL this season to prove Corica wrong. I've wanted to avoid saying this on camera, but I think I'm going to have to now. I think Ivanovic might be best looking at a move in the off-season to a club where he's going to get game time. And MacArthur could look at him. I like the idea of potentially him going interstate to, say, Brisbane, just to give more depth. When he first came into the squad, I said, and a lot of other fans at Sydney echoed my same sentiments, that if he stays on the development path that he looks like he's going towards, he could very well end up in Europe in 5 years. And that's obviously taken a back step because he hasn't been playing. Both times he started, he scored. So I don't know why he's not getting more of a chance. That's something that Corica knows, and Corica obviously doesn't want to tell us, and that's fine. That's Corica's prerogative as a coach. At 2-9s, I'm probably going to go just on sheer talent. I'm going to go Bobo as a starter, which is weird. I didn't think I'd be saying that in 2021. And I like Bahaja. I think having both of those two at front. So to recap for Shaun, who's just come back. Redmayne in goal.
I'll guess your lineup. All right, are you ready? Because I missed the start of it. Right, Redmayne in goal. Yep. It's King and Grant at the fullbacks. It's McGowan and Wilkinson as the defenders. Anchoring midfield is Bratton and Neuvenhoff. You've got Nikovic on the left. Caceres on the right, I'm guessing. And then up top, you've got Bahaja and Bobo, which is the one that was, to be honest, a bit of a surprise to me. So I think I know where your head's at with it, which is quite interesting because the other person who doesn't quite seem sold on Callum Neuenhoff is Steve Corica. And I also think, and this is one where you might disagree, like I know you're a big rat for Luke Ivanovic. I just heard you kind of gushing praise about him. Patrick Wood's a very good player, and Patrick Wood is effectively what I think they've signed. He's a younger Australian, more mobile version of what they want Bobo to be, which is like the guy that stands in the box and like kind of knocks the 6-yard goals home, which is what Adam Lafondra did so well last season. I think the fascinating point for me is that I've never rated Costa Barbarouses as a striker. I think his best role is in a wide area, either cutting in on the left or playing over on the right. Sydney don't play in that structure and that style. They are determined and adamant and refuse to change from this 4-2-2-2 that they've been playing since the start of the Graham Arnold era, albeit with much better players back in the day like Mijiewski and Brosk and everybody else that was playing in that lineup at that time. But I think the fascinating part is that everyone's a massive rat for Joel King, and Corica seems to have earned his confidence. I don't know if Michael Zullo's fully fit. If Michael Zullo gets fit and immediately loses his place, then Steve Corica clearly has an issue trusting young players that he needs to work through with some sort of counsellor. Because Neuenhoff has been fantastic. He's been better than Paolo Retro has been this season as far as I'm concerned from the outside looking in. Every time I've seen him play, he's been excellent, and Retro I'm not super impressed with at any point. Bratton is obviously class and quality. But you've got Caceres and Barmyang who can play at the base of midfield as well, so there's good depth there. Wide right is the frustrating part because I think it doesn't make the best use of Caceres. Who is a good player on his day, is frustrating because he doesn't quite... He has all the tools in his arsenal to be an elite level number 10 in the A-League, but he's just never got that consistency together or that decision making or that final ball or that vision to ever get there, because he was a Melbourne City player for a long time, and he was actually he was bought from the Central Coast Mariners by Manchester City and was a part of their academy structure. He never went there, but they saw something in him and thought it might be developed and brought on. He went and had a loan spell over in Saudi Arabia as well, or Qatar, or wherever it was. Apologies to fans from that area, I've forgotten the club, but he's good. Bumyahan obviously played semi-finals of the Champions League, had a ton of talent that's just gone off a cliff lately. I would love to see Costa Barbarouses move to the right to try and get him in that wing space to offer something different. I think what the challenge is, though, that when you do that, he's going to move into some of the areas that Ryan Grant gets into, and they might potentially be stepping on each other's toes. I would love to see Patrick Wood up front, either with Bobo or with Bahaja, whoever you want. That's fine, because I think he's got 4 goals in like 6 appearances in the A-League this season. Most of those appearances coming in like the last 20 minutes of matches. So he's a good finisher. He's got talent. He was the NPL leading scorer last season at the New South Wales NPL level, if you guys are familiar with that competition, where he scored like 19 goals in 17 games or something. So he's ready for that step up. He needs to be pushing it. I think Patrick Wood's a much better player than Ivanovic, based on the 2 appearances that I've seen for Ivanovic throughout the course of history. And I think Corica's issue is that he needs to find a way. So Sydney FC are now 8th. They've dropped behind Western United this past run of fixtures. We'll talk about the ladder more when we get to it. But what would be the issue, I think, with Corica playing Joel King every week, Callum Neuvenhoff in midfield every week alongside Bratton and whoever else, and then Wood up front? Like, that's really trying to build and develop some good young homegrown talent from Sydney that hasn't really been given an opportunity over the last few years. And that's been the big criticism of Sydney, is that they don't bring through their own young talent. The likes of Max Burgess had to go to Wellington to get his chance and is now at Western United. Cam Devlin, Charles Lockerlingoi. There's a long laundry list of players that had careers that started.
Over at Melbourne City.
Marco Tilio, another great example.
He left the search game time and has barely made an impact there. So
he has been playing, to be fair. He hasn't started. That's the issue, is that Noon and Naboo start when they're fully fit, or Naboo, sorry. But to Tilio's credit, he got like 35 minutes against Western United and changed the game. So he is getting opportunities that, just like the one this past week, Tuesday, is that the one you're talking of? Where he got I think he ran on the field as the final whistle was going, and that was pretty much his one contribution. But yeah, like, that's just off the top of our heads there, without putting any research into it. That's a bunch of players that have left Sydney FC's supposed talent factory to go and get opportunities elsewhere, because neither Graham Arnold nor Steve Corica have been able to develop young players for the future. And I think that's what Steve Corica really needs to look at. I think he needs to not just look at this season and being competitive in it, because I think Sydney will be by the quality of their team regardless. I think he also needs to start looking to the future and maybe having a bit more patience. I don't think they needed to sign Bobo. I do think they needed to give Patrick Wood a start. And Geordie Swibble, we haven't even spoken about. So, like, you know, he's obviously another player that they're seeing every day that they rate very highly as well, because he came on during the course of the week and got good minutes against Melbourne City in a big fixture, a grand final rematch from last season. So, yeah, they've got young players there. It's just whether Corica is going to put the trust in them, or he's just going to keep putting out the same 35-year-olds across the park to try and drag them through to another title. Everybody's premiership window, championship window, closes at a certain point. Sydney FC's has been long. It's been historically good. I think maybe they're starting to get to that point now, though, where they need to start transitioning some of the young talent through. So it'll be fascinating to see how that works out. You can't see this, Stephen, but the headline that I went with underneath that fantastic picture of Markel Susueta is "Out with the old, in with the new." One, because I think it represents, MacArthur coming in and getting a good away win against Sydney FC, but also what we're talking about here, which is Sydney FC's need to start getting some of the next young talent, the talent they're going to build around and become their spine for the next 5 to 10 years, in that lineup as soon as possible. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yep, I'm in complete agreement with you. I actually wrote an article on this in the early days of the reserve team, so feel free to go back and check it out, where I talked about Sydney FC's youth. I've been very critical of Corica and the under-reliance, under-reliance on youth, and just the way the setup is. There's a lot of talent coming through. We rattled off all the names. And to go back to what you said, the only reason I didn't have Patrick Wood starting is for the exact same reason that I don't think Alec Qual is going to start at the Mariners. That's because I think he's too good they're both too good off the bench at the moment to have starting. That's not to say they can't. Patrick Wood has had a couple of starts and has looked good in them, but I think their best role at the moment is off the bench. And that may change either later this season or next season. So that's the only reason I went with Bobo and Bahaja as my top two there.
Just a quick question, and sorry if you don't know this. Is Bahaja injured at the moment? Because I haven't seen him for a couple of weeks.
I believe he copped a knock a couple of weeks ago. I will quickly look it up, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he copped a knock a couple of weeks ago. And that's why he's either been on the bench or... Otherwise, where is it? Google's letting me down.
It's all good. It's not super important anyway. I will highlight that the goals for Sydney for their 8 games played, 8 games being the most of this group that we're going to talk about, only 10 scored during that period. Only Newcastle and Melbourne City have worse goal score records in the division itself. Melbourne City, of course, having played a game less during that period as well. So it's not the same swashbuckling, free-scoring Sydney FC side that we've been used to over the last few years. So if they, again, and you and I, Stephen, 3 months ago now, sat down and did a season preview asking where they were going to replace those goals for Lafondra. I don't think they've found the answer to that question yet. So that's the big challenge for them. And again, like you mentioned, they hit the post today. They created a bit, like they had chances. It was just really that letting them down. And I think that's the difference between them at the moment, sitting in 8th spot and potentially being in the top 6 early on. But having said that, they were 3rd like 2 weeks ago. So such as the ebbs and flows of the A-League at the moment, with so many teams having played so many different games. But we do have one more game to cover off, Steve, and I know you and I could probably talk about Sydney FC for the rest of the afternoon and evening and into the early hours of the morning, but we might jump forward to the next one.
I do just want to quickly talk about MacArthur before we move on. Sure. It is a knee injury for Bahaja at the moment. Was expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks at the start of the month, so it should be back in the next couple of weeks. MacArthur is sitting 2nd on the ladder at the moment. Are they a serious threat at winning a trophy this year? I'm not specifying which trophy because I don't know, but are they a serious threat to at least contend for one? Either the Premier's Plate or the Championship.
Look, anybody can beat anybody on their day at the moment in the Championship stakes. So I think that portion's different. Like I think depending on their run, I don't think, like full disclosure, when we talk about the A-League ladder, when we get to it, I think there's a few sides that are sitting high on the list that I don't think are going to have the longevity to keep going all season. And because the league has been so even, so at the moment, the way things stand, Perth Glory in 6th spot, but they've only played 6 games. If they win their games in hand, they'll go top of the league, which I don't think anybody expected given the way that they've played for their 2 defeats. Central Coast Mariners, currently top of the division, have 3 defeats during that period. MacArthur, 3 defeats, 2 draws, 5 wins, albeit some of those wins against lower league sides or teams that are lower in the division. Like MacArthur beat Wellington, they beat Newcastle. Did they beat Sydney FC the first time round, or was that a draw? It's all right. We'll figure that one out in a moment. But they beat Western Sydney. They lost to Western Sydney. So they've been up and down, and I think. Yeah, are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. We're 2 for 2 now. No, that first Sydney game against Sydney FC for MacArthur was the Mark Milligan red card and a
Sydney 1-3-0. Yep, correct.
Sydney FC. I have my own criticisms about how that game played out for Sydney, despite the win, but.
Yeah, we'll leave that one for another week. I was just more referencing like who they've played and who they've come up against, and I think the fact that they've got those defeats against sides that you would determine as being some of the better sides in the competition. I haven't watched MacArthur at any point this year, and they've swept a team aside, and I thought like, oh shit, they're going to go on and do whatever else. They did beat Adelaide 4-0 on the back of a Matt Derbyshire hat trick. But again, like that was more about how poor I thought Adelaide were rather than how dominant MacArthur was. I think they're still figuring out what their best lineup is, and I think they're still figuring out how to get the best out of certain players. I don't think they're getting the best out of Benyat in the current structure. I think Susueta was magnificent today, but I don't think they're setting the team up to really get the best out of him either. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of questions around MacArthur. Do I think they'll make the 6? I probably do. Once they get to that top 6, can they beat everybody? Yeah, sure. Why not? They can, but I don't think they're going to have... I don't think a brand new club and a brand new team going through the lessons that they are going through this season are going to have that staying power to put in a concerted premiership effort. I don't think that's really within their realm. I think they'll still be internally as well, just looking at a top 6 finish to start off their seasons.
Yep, fair enough. I have a similar assessment that anyone can beat anyone on their day, especially in this league. They're going to be contenders, and that's all you can ask from them for a first-year side. Not everyone can go on and do what the Wanderers did and dominate the competition. Coming in during this COVID era would have been a lot more difficult, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. From ticket prices to restrictions to everything they've done. In the lead up to this. So, yeah, pencil them in for the 6. Although that could come back to haunt me, and I am going to reference something I did say on the podcast earlier this week as we transition into the final A-League game that took place this weekend of Newcastle Jets and Wellington. As I mentioned, the podcast recorded this week was before the Victory and Wellington game on Wednesday afternoon, and I said that Wellington will make the 6. I'm calling myself out here. That came back to bite me on the arse really quickly. Or so I thought, until I saw bits and pieces of this game against Newcastle, where Wellington looked like they've put together what I've been seeing bits and pieces of this season, which is dominant performances in parts and just not able to string together the finishing touches. A 2-0 victory to the Knicks here. Goals to David Ball and Ben Waine early on in the first half. Saw them run out big winners over the Newcastle Jets. They had that disappointing loss to the victory, which we already touched on a little bit earlier. Will this win allow them to try and turn their season around, or is it best for both teams to start looking forward to next season, given that they both currently have 10 and 9 games gone for this season, given that they may not be able to turn it around with the run home?
Look, maybe this is one that we skate past this result relatively quickly, because I think we want to talk about the ladder relating to Wellington, and we want to talk about the ladder relating to Newcastle. This scoreline deceives a little bit, because I don't think Wellington were 2 goals better than Newcastle Jets on the day. The screenshot that everybody can see here is that the David Ball peeling off, his shot was heavily deflected and it took the keeper the wrong way for Jack Duncan, and it snuck in near post. And Ben Waine's goal, fantastic goal from about 25 yards out, just smashed it into the bottom corner, very good strike. So, but again, like, I think because of the distance of travel and because it was like kind of along the ground, I think Jack Duncan would want that one back as well. So, well, Newcastle had their chances, had their shouts. The Newcastle fans, to their credit, got there and made it a big, loud, occasion, which is good. Like, that's got to give them credit as well for staying supporting their team, even though they're trying their best each week and all the challenges that they've had. I don't like, this doesn't change anything as far as I'm concerned with Wellington. Like, they, for me, have been, I think, average in midfield. I'm not sold on the Rufer-Devlin partnership at the base. I don't think that is like a top 6 midfield partnership. And at the back, they've got their own issues with Luke De Vere out injured, where they don't really have much depth in their defensive stocks to really be challenging the best sides in the division. What they turned around and did was to sign Charles Lokolingoi, who's a striker. It was like having a car that won't start so you get new rims. Like, that seemed like it was a signing that wasn't necessarily... I think personally, and I'm not a footballing expert, I'll completely defer to Ufuk Talay knowing way more about the game than I do, but it just seemed like the wrong signing. It seemed like at a time when they needed defensive solidity and some defensive depth, they went and signed a striker for some reason. When they already have David Ball, Tamer Hamed, who you'd expect to be the starting 2, Mirza Muradovic, Ben Waine, and now Lokolingoi again in there as like a 5th choice. It seemed like a strange one for me. Not that I'm against players who are dominant at an NPL level getting A-League opportunities, it just didn't seem to me to be the thing that Wellington needed. So I'm not sure if they have resolved their issues in midfield as far as depth is concerned. I think they need a bit more depth in their creativity in wide areas. If De Vere has a great game, they're fine. If he doesn't, who else picks up the slack? Piscopo can only do so much. Clayton Lewis hasn't quite worked out. There's a few other players as well that haven't quite worked out. Their defense is their big issue, though. They don't necessarily have that depth there, I think, to compete. I don't expect them or Newcastle to be making the top 6. And nothing, even with the 3 points today from Wellington, made me think that they'd turned a corner or that they'd unearthed someone fantastic that was going to be it. Ben Waine, great for him, fantastic goal. I think that might have been his first in the league, and it was a fantastic goal, an absolute cracker. So power to him, credit to him. Maybe we'll see more of him over the next few weeks, but they still took him off 2 minutes later to bring on Tamer Hamed, and they looked as blunt as they've ever looked once he was back out on the park. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure with this one. What do you think? Do you think this is a new horizon for the Phoenix?
I've just said they're going to make the 6. So yeah, I think they're going to turn it around. If only so I don't look like more of a fool than I already have. Between all the comments I've made.
Look, this is fine. Trust me, mate, there's nothing you could ever say on this channel that gets anywhere near some of the dumb shit that's come out of my mouth throughout the course of these weeks. So, like, there's a podcast I drank a bottle of wine in. Thank God that one wasn't live, or that would have been all kinds of chaos. Maybe now we segue across and we have a look at the A-League ladder, because what I'd love to do is get your thoughts and opinions on, like, how you rate Wellington's squad against some of the other teams around him, and I'd like to revisit the same thing for Melbourne Victory. So I'm just going to bring that up now. So
yep.
Do you want to read through the current standings?
Well, yep. So we'll go. I'm trying to. We'll go bottom to top because all the action seems to be at the bottom. So we got in last place we have Melbourne Victory with 7 points. We have Wellington Phoenix with 8 points. Melbourne City with 9 points. 987 to round out the bottom. Seems like a statistician's dream. We have Newcastle Jets, Sydney FC, and Western United. in 9, 8, and 7, all on 11 points. Goal differential proving the separator there. We have Perth Glory in 6th place on 12 points. Adelaide United, 13 points. Western Sydney, 13 points at 5 and 4 respectively. Brisbane with 14 points, and Macarthur and Central Coast up top with 17 points for Macarthur, 18 points for the Central Coast. The big one that stands out to me there, and we'll go back to the bottom of the table here, is it's 11 points for Newcastle, but it's 10 games. The team directly beneath them, Melbourne City, 7 games, who looked absolutely amazing with Andrew Naboo back in the lineup on Tuesday night against Sydney FC side that isn't performing up to the Sydney FC standards from the last couple of years, and we've touched on that already. I look at that Wellington squad, and I think there's a lot of talent there. I think they're definitely better than Newcastle, and we saw that today. On paper, it seems like they have a better squad than Melbourne Victory. Despite what Wednesday's game would suggest, I think that on paper they have a better squad, but this is why you play the games on grass and you don't play them on paper, because weird things happen in this game that we love. I think Melbourne City has a better squad when fully fit, have a better squad than most sides in this league. And I think they really missed the absence of, they really missed Andrew Naboo during the injury absence, which is why they're so far down the bottom of the table. So I expect them to pick up some points and pick them up quickly. I don't think they have a better squad than Western United. I think they have a better squad than Perth Glory, but it's just the way things have worked out that Wellington have had a little bit of a tough go of it. That's not to say that it's an excuse, but they're playing away from home. They're based out of Wollongong. They've been based out of Australia for the better part of the last 12 months, or the worst part of the last 12 months, depending on which way you want to look at it. And it's going to be that way for the next 6 months until the end of the season, because I don't see them getting permission from the Australian government and the New Zealand government to do cross-country travel.
This might blow your mind, but there's less than 3 months to go in the season.
Jesus Christ, really?
Yeah. Tomorrow's the start of March, and the final series should be wrapped up by the end of May.
Okay, so they're going to be based out of Australia for the better part of 3 months.
No, I didn't mean like that. I just meant more like
I didn't say 6 months, so that'll be basically a full year.
No, I didn't mean to correct that portion. It was just more like how mind-blowing it is that we've got so much football still to come. It feels like we've got another 6 months of football to go, but we are actually within the last 12 weeks of the season effectively, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But look, here's what I'd counter. I think their squad is better than Newcastle Jets. I think you're right there. I think it could be argued that it's not as good as Melbourne Victories. I'll give them benefit of the doubt and say it is. I don't think there's anybody else who I think they have a better squad than. And that is crazy. If we had this conversation at the start of the season, maybe I throw Perth and Central Coast in that category, but the way that they've started, the way they're playing, I think that they're well ahead of the Wellington Phoenix at the moment. So yeah, that's a fascinating one. And same with Melbourne Victory, the conversation that I kind of wanted to have. Who's their squad better than? Maybe it's better than Newcastle Jets, maybe Wellington Phoenix, but there's no one else whose squad I would trade for Melbourne Victory's squad at the moment as far as the league is concerned. There are individuals in there that are very good for both Wellington Phoenix and Melbourne Victory, but the overall depth, the overall quality, I don't think they've got teams that are going to really pull up stumps. I do think Newcastle will fall down the table. I think that fact that they've played 10 games and have 11 points, I think if Wellington win that additional game in hand and go above them, that Wellington won't look back. But yeah, I think Newcastle, Wellington and Melbourne Victory would expect it to be in the bottom 3 unless the wheels absolutely come off elsewhere in the division. So yeah, it's a very interesting time from it. But top 6, who are you liking most out of the top 6 so far? And who do you think is going to be there for the long haul? Or who potentially do you think might fall down the table? Because you keep one eye over your shoulder. Perth Glory have a lot of games in hand. Western United playing some good football. Your team, Sydney FC, is still out of the 6. And Melbourne City, as we've already mentioned, only 7 games played. So they've got quite a bit of football coming and are playing relatively well based on that Sydney performance. So where are we at? Who's falling out of the top 5?
I think Brisbane might fall out. As said, they're currently in 3rd, but they spent a lot of the start of the season up in Brisbane, and we've talked about how tough of an away trip that is, dealing with the heat, the humidity. The Brisbane will have to potentially balance Champions League commitments because we still don't know what's happening there. Sydney FC and Melbourne have the same problem. We're going to have to balance Champions League commitments. Sydney FC have the experience, though, when it comes to balancing those commitments with late runs in the season, just because of how often they've been there in the last few years. Haven't done anything in the competition, but they know how to balance the commitments and get the best in the back end of the season. Apart from Brisbane, I don't know who drops out. I think this next run of 4 games for Perth Glory, where they'll start to catch up a little bit. They've only played 6 games so far, as everyone else has really played 9 or 10. A couple of other teams are sitting around that 7-8 mark, but the fact of the matter is that it's tough. I don't know who drops out based on where we are currently. I think that apart from Brisbane, I think you're going to be looking at 2 or 3 teams who are just going to miss by a couple of points, and we'll be looking back earlier in the season at a couple of these results. Like potentially we'll be looking at Sydney FC missing the 6 by 2 points, and you look at it, they should have had a win against Brisbane last week or the week before, if it wasn't for tremendous saves by Jamie Young and the fact that Sydney keep on hitting the post. There's going to be little things that just pop up here and there as we get towards the back end of the season. I think it's too early to tell or call who's going to miss out based on this, just because there's so many variables up in the air. And as I said, the only reason I've got Brisbane dropping out is because they may be struggle to balance those Champions League commitments. We all know what happened last time they were in the Champions League. Numbers fell off everywhere, and they went crashing out to a side from Thailand. You mentioned that we've got an interesting couple of months of football ahead of us, and a lot of action to take place. I believe games will be taking place almost daily, just to try to get the fixture in by the end of June. It's going to be a lot of fun. Do we have any questions from the chat about anything we've talked about in the last 50 minutes or so in regards to the A-League?
No, we are all good. As always, I think we thank you, everybody, for listening. But I think that brings us to an end, mate. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be very interesting. We still don't know as well if the Asian Champions League is going to go ahead, given different restrictions in a lot of countries. We don't know if it's going to be a hub. I don't know if a hub destroys the A-League season or it actually makes it a lot easier for those 3 sides. We don't know. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch still up in the air, which is going to be fascinating to see over the next few weeks. What I do hope is that, when we sync up, of course, next week and recap the results, when we sync up again in a month's time, maybe we've got a clearer picture where more teams have played the same amount of games, because it's so difficult at the moment with hypothetical games in hand to actually kind of gauge where teams are at and how teams are performing. I think if we were to do it on the performances we've seen so far, it looks very different to the actual A-League table that we're seeing. Adelaide United have been great at home, but terrible away from home. Is that good? Is winning half your games good enough to get into the final series this year? I'm not sure. Western Sydney, yes, they're in the top 4, but they've only won 3 matches so far this season. They're just hard to beat and they don't concede a lot. Is that enough to actually get them in? We don't entirely know. So, fascinating time. Best league in the world, obviously, of course. But unfortunately, mate, we're going to jump into the final screen because that brings us to the end for another week.
Yep. Thank you very much for joining us here on this relaunch of the Weekend Recap, a bumper 2+ hour edition to start. We are going to try to keep this to 2 hours over the coming weeks. But, when we talk about football, you go off on all these tangents. Things pop up at every time. We had, if I'm just looking at the run sheet here, we budgeted 15 minutes for several games, and I'm pretty sure we spent 20 talking about certain games and just the way they ran out. I look forward to taking this journey with all of you. I really want you to join us here every week on the Weekend Recap, Sunday nights, about 5 or 10 minutes following the conclusion of the last game of the weekend on a Sunday night. Join us during the week. on Wednesdays for our Football Manager stream over on the Twitch channel. Some excellent work going there with the National Second Division. Shaun, I can see you're incredibly proud of your work there with the Football Manager. Given how much you love it, and you're still trying to get me hooked on it, we, like everything, there's no time. Stay tuned to us here on Twitch. Follow us on Twitter at ReserveTeamAU. I'm at Poletti Steven on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk stuff. Send us tweets. Tell us what you disliked about this show, what you want to see in coming weeks. Shaun, what are your socials?
Oh, mate, links are in the description below. I think you've covered off everything that you could possibly cover off. If you want to check out more Reserve Team content, check out our links in the description below. Check out reserveteam.com.au for everything Australian and New Zealand football. Come back, check out our regular Sunday night Twitch streams. Maybe next week, actually, Steven. I should have mentioned this earlier on, but next weekend's actually the Queen's birthday long weekend or Labor Day long weekend, so it's a Monday off in Melbourne. We'll see what that does to the fixturing, and we might actually even have like a Monday night or a late Sunday night episode, depending on the fixture list. But like you and I, our biggest issue is that we talk too much about football, so hopefully people have enjoyed the ride with us tonight.
Yep, well, stay tuned to us on Twitter at ReserveTeamAU once again, and we'll be able to post when our next stream is. If it's not on Sunday night, that's the easiest way to follow all our content. We post everything on Twitter. You can also like us on Facebook. We need more likes over there. That's all I can really say is hit us up on our socials. Check us over at reserveteam.com.au. Some amazing articles coming out from all the contributors here. Thank you very much for joining in, and we'll see you next week.